You open on a ridiculous, deliciously impossible image. You, helmet slightly crooked, surfing on the blade of a sunbeam like it's a silver ribbon, unspooling across the dark, and the universe, normally so chatty with stars, goes quiet as if someone pressed a cosmic mute button. Hello and welcome to this quiet corner, where curiosity settles in silence and science is told in the breath of dreams. Tonight, you don't need to memorize equations or chase any proofs. Just breathe, soften your shoulders, and let the room go warm and dim. I'll steer, you float. If you find this little voyage interesting, calming, or just the right kind of strange companion for the night, I'd be grateful if you liked the video, subscribed, or shared this quiet moment with someone who needs it. The trick to riding a beam is admitting you can't, not really, and then asking what time would do if you could. That's the heart of the thought experiment Einstein loved to poke with a stick. Imagine chasing a light wave. As you match its speed, what happens to the clock in your hand, to the heartbeat in your chest, to the flicker of your own thoughts? At ordinary speeds, everything feels stubbornly normal. But as you creep toward light speed c 299,792, 458 c equals 299, 792, 458 c, 299,792,458 meters per second in vacuum, a very rude number to memorize. Time begins to sag, like a hammock with too many afternoons in it. You notice it first in small ways. Your wristwatch ticks with dignity, but a camera outside your ship swears it's ticking slow. Both are right, because time isn't a global chorus. It's a local whisper that depends on how you move. That's the central idea tonight. Time dilation. The faster you go relative to someone else, the more your time stretches compared to theirs. Not metaphorically, literally. If that feels unfair, you're already learning the first lesson of physics. The universe is not obligated to be emotionally consistent. Joke 1. If it were, your socks from the dryer would return as pairs. Push the throttle. Space ahead seems to fold into you. Distance is contracting so your destination looks closer even if its star still keeps its private name. Your ship hums like a lullaby you can't place, the kind of tune a refrigerator sings at 2 a.m. when it thinks no one is listening. The outside world, if you could peep at it through a perfectly calibrated window, is racing. Clocks over there are sprinting, birthdays are stacking, seasons flipping pages like a speed reader. Inside, your heartbeat holds a measured pace, because time in your pocket is loyal to you. Science fact, tucked gently under your pillow. Muons born high in Earth's atmosphere reach the ground far more often than they should if Newton alone ran the show. Their lifetimes are too short for the trip unless they're moving close to light speed. To them, less time passes. To us, their journey is longer, but their clocks have stretched, and so they arrive. A little miracle of rain that proves time bends for speed. If you ever wanted proof that time is flexible, imagine ghostly particles beating the traffic because their wristwatches yawned. Odd fact to keep. In a sense, light itself doesn't age. A photon has no rest frame. There's no sensible way to sit with it and ask, so, how long was your trip? Between emission and absorption, you could say it experiences zero proper time. That's not romantic poetry. It's the geometry of space-time. Of course, scientists still debate whether it's meaningful to talk about what a photon experiences at all. Experience implies a frame, and light refuses to sit still for portraits. Joke 2. Photons are terrible podcast guests. No mic discipline, too fast, never stop to sip water. You test the throttle again. The beam under your feet doesn't budge because you can't quite catch it. The mathematics won't let you. Every extra push adds more energy to your mass energy tab, and the bill grows like a to-do list in a fresh year. The closer you get to CCC, the more the price approaches infinity, and infinity is famously bad for your credit. But what if, you murmur, I slip through some side door? We'll get there later. The whispered words warp metric and wormhole are waiting in darker rooms, but tonight you're learning the doorway's shape by staring at its lock. There's a tenderness to this, strangely. You glance back toward home and feel a tug of ache. If you keep accelerating, you will return to find people you love older, maybe gone, while your face in the mirror holds stubbornly to the same season. That's not science as punishment. It's the neutral symmetry of relativity. Your path through space-time is different from theirs. Time dilation isn't a trick of cameras. It's the geometry of your life. If you've ever felt the emotional version nights that last forever when you're anxious, afternoons that vanish when you're in love, you already know the shape of the lesson, even if the math writes it in a sterner hand. You become aware of the soundscape. Instruments whispering, an air recycler with the work ethic of a monk, faint taps as dust motes tiny, ancient stowaways kiss the hull and announce entire biographies in a single click. Outside, galaxies are postcards that mailed themselves before your grandparents met. Inside, your breath fogs the glass with small clouds that come and go like shy weather. Joke 3. You try a heroic captain pose and immediately bump your head on a harmless panel space, remains undefeated. Now the paradox creeps in like a cat that owns the house. If you could ride with the beam again, you cannot. But dreams have their visas. What would time feel like? Your own clock would try to stall until it becomes meaningless, while the universe outside burns through eons between your blinks. That asymmetry is the story's spine. It's why GPS satellites need relativity corrections. Their clocks tick differently from ground clocks because of both speed and gravity. Without those corrections, your phone's map would wander like a sleepwalker, and you'd miss your turn for late-night noodles. Practical modernity hums because Einstein scribbled, but there's something softer beneath the cleverness. You, the night drifter, might be chasing light for a quieter reason. Maybe you want to catch one perfect memory where it began, at the moment it left someone's eyes. Maybe you're asking whether speed could redeem regret by letting you arrive before you left. There's courage in acknowledging the answer is no, even if one day we curve space-time in clever ways. Cause and effect are clingy companions. Physics keeps our stories stitched together, so meaning can survive the trip. Scientists still debate whether any physically realistic mechanism could permit superluminal travel without tearing causality, whether exotic matter for warp metrics could exist, whether quantum entanglement offers hints without offering loopholes. The arguments aren't angry, they're patient, late-night conversations over chalk dust and coffee, with the universe as the shy guest listening from the doorway. Meanwhile, the speed of light remains a boundary not just of speed, but of knowable sequence, the tempo line that lets cosmic music make sense. So you stand floating, technically, on your imagined sunbeam and learn the first ritual of this journey. Respect the limit to understand the change. Time is not a river with one current. It's a fabric that stretches, a map that reshapes around your motion, a clock that loves its owner more than consensus. If you keep your voice low, you can almost hear the seconds lengthen as you accelerate, each one growing long and drowsy, reluctant to leave your palm. Settle back. Let the beams slide beneath you, bright and indifferent. The room around you is safe, the pillow knows your name, and somewhere inside your chest, a metronome keeps time, the only way it knows how one beat at a time, no matter how the stars argue. We'll explore the doorways later, the messages that arrive too early, the parties where everyone swears they were first, the strange roads with tachyon streetlights. For now, breathe. The lesson is simple and vast. The faster you race, the slower your time will flow. And that quiet truth is the lullaby that starts our night. You drift onward, the hum of your imagined craft steady as a cat's purr, but there's a figure sitting quietly across from you now. Einstein himself, looking a little bemused that you've caught up with him in the half-lit cabin. His hair is not the wild comic book lightning you expect, but soft and slightly mussed, like he just napped through a long seminar. He has that look of someone who doesn't mind the silence but will tell you something if you ask the right way. He leans forward, elbows on his knees, and says without saying what he once admitted to a friend. He started imagining this stuff as a teenager. Back then, young Albert pictured himself chasing a beam of light, just like you did a moment ago. But instead of surfing it like you, he asked, what would I see? Would the wave look frozen beside me? Would its oscillations just stop? That single thought experiment was a pebble in a pond that rippled out into special relativity in 1905. The room tilts as he draws an invisible diagram in the air. Space-time, a single sheet that insists space and time aren't separate after all. You want to interrupt and say that's obvious, but then you remember it wasn't. Not to the scientists who still pictured time as universal and absolute, a metronome ticking identically for everyone, everywhere. Einstein tore that up and replaced it with the idea that time depends on the observer's motion. It's not a fixed background, it's a player in the game. Science fact, presented like a bedtime mint. Before Einstein, the great project was to find the luminiferous ether, an invisible medium through which light was thought to travel much like sound needs air. The Michelson-Morley experiment in 1887 set out to detect Earth's motion through this ether. They found nothing. No wind, no drift. It was as if light didn't care about a medium at all. This puzzled physicists deeply until Einstein stepped in with the radical idea that light speed is constant for all observers, no matter how fast they're moving. That's not a concession, it's the whole foundation. You picture it. The cosmic rulebook stating, everyone measures light at the same speed. No exceptions. Even you with your hair on fire and a jet strapped to your socks. From this, everything else spills out. Time dilation, length contraction, simultaneity becoming slippery. Odd fact to keep you company. Einstein didn't win the Nobel Prize for relativity. He got it for explaining the photoelectric effect, the way light can knock electrons out of metal, which was crucial for quantum theory. Relativity? Too controversial at the time. Scientists still debate whether his original derivations could have been replaced with other interpretations, but the experimental confirmations keep stacking up like polite but insistent reminders. He takes a sip of tea from a mug that absolutely should not be steady in zero gravity, but here it behaves. He asks you to picture two trains passing each other at near light speeds, each with a passenger striking a match in the middle of the carriage. To one passenger, the flame's light reaches both ends at the same time. To the other, on the opposite train, the light hits one end first, then the other. Both are right. Simultaneity is no longer universal, it depends on your frame of reference. That's where the world starts to feel bendy. You nod, feeling the cabin stretch in your mind's eye, as if you're suddenly aware that now is a local event, not a cosmic declaration. If this is true, you realize the idea of exceeding the speed of light isn't just about moving faster. It's about smashing a glass wall that holds the order of events together. The hum of the ship takes on a deeper tone, a slow heartbeat. You notice the instruments showing strange readouts, distances ahead shortening, clocks outside running differently from yours. Einstein doesn't flinch. He knew this would happen, even in thought experiments. Push faster, and space shrinks in your direction of travel. Push faster still, and time for you flows more slowly relative to others. Push beyond CCC? His eyes twinkle, and he shakes his head like a chess player, declining a foolish move. The math breaks. Energy demands skyrocket. Causality snarls itself into knots. Here's the emotional part you weren't expecting. You feel protective of this speed limit. Without it, the fabric of cause and effect could tear, and the stories we live by might stop making sense. Physics doesn't just govern motion, it guards the sequence of moments. You think of a book where the pages could be read in any order. It might still be ink and paper, but it wouldn't be a story anymore. Joke 1. Imagine trying to argue with customer service when their reply arrives before your complaint. Worse, they've already closed the ticket. Einstein rises, gestures to the window, and suddenly you see Earth, not as a blue marble, but as a clock, oceans and continents turning under a vast second hand made of shadow. The station you left behind ticks away at one pace, your craft at another. Relativity is the reason neither is wrong. Scientists still debate the future of these principles, whether quantum gravity will rewrite them, whether the constant speed of light might be emergent rather than fundamental, whether space itself could allow exceptions under extreme conditions like cosmic inflation. But for now, Einstein's rules hold, and your beam-chasing game can only be played to a point. Joke 2. You imagine Einstein in a modern setting. trying to explain relativity to a rideshare driver. Yes, we'll get there faster, but your clock will disagree with mine. And the driver nods politely before muting you with the radio. The ship drifts, engines idling. You realize you're not chasing the beam anymore, you're pacing alongside Einstein's ideas, letting them sink in without trying to outrun them. There's a certain humility in knowing the limit exists, in knowing that the game is about approaching the line, not smashing it. Limits define the shape of the playground. And so, as Einstein fades from the seat across from you, his outline softening into the air, you're left with the first true key to the journey. The speed of light is not an arbitrary rule. It's the stitching that holds space and time together, a constant that ensures the universe plays fair, even when the game looks strange from your corner of it. Breathe. Let the hum lull you. You'll need your calm for the next stretch, when your own clock starts to play tricks and the seconds decide they'd rather stroll than sprint. The hum deepens, and now the clock in your hand becomes the star of the show. It's just a simple analog one, white face, black hands, nothing flashy, but tonight it's more than a timekeeper. It's a stubborn little truth teller. You hold it up and see the second hand sweep its arc exactly as it should, steady, predictable, loyal. But you glance at the external feed, a camera pointed back toward the observation station you left, and you see their clock ticking faster than yours. Or maybe it's yours that's slow. Either way, the friendship between your timelines is strained. You don't feel any different, of course. Your heartbeat is calm. The air still smells faintly metallic and filtered. Your tea, miraculously spill-proof in its magnet bottom mug, tastes exactly like a mild betrayal of whatever the box promised. But the numbers don't lie. Time dilation has begun, not in a grand fireworks kind of way, but like a whisper that becomes more noticeable the more you try to ignore it. Odd fact to hold on to: astronauts aboard the International Space Station actually experience a tiny bit of time dilation compared to Earth. They orbit at about 7.66 km per second, so over a year, they age about 0.01 seconds less than people on the surface. It's microscopic, but it's real tiny wrinkles in time that space travel quietly slips into your passport. You tap the glass of your watch, not because it needs it, but because you're suddenly aware it's becoming a kind of anchor to your now. Outside, now, is changing shape depending on who's doing the measuring. It's unsettling, like hearing two different versions of the same song playing in two rooms and realizing they're both correct, just out of sync. Joke 1. You wonder if this means you could use time dilation as an excuse for being late. Sorry, my clock's relativistically slower than yours, but it probably won't work on dentists or landlords. The strangest part? You feel no resistance? Physics isn't making the seconds feel longer in your body. It's just making them disagree with the universe's consensus. And if you could keep accelerating toward light speed, this slow disagreement would turn into full-on defiance. Your seconds could stretch to minutes, hours, even years compared to someone else's frame. You could travel 100 years into their future and only feel a few months pass. It's not magic, it's geometry. Here's the human connection, the emotional knot in the math. Imagine leaving Earth to visit a star 10 light years away, traveling at 99.9% the speed of light. For you, the trip might take just over 10 years round trip. For everyone back home, decades could pass. You'd return to find your friends older, your city changed, and maybe the world speaking in a slang you don't understand. Time dilation is as much about loss as it is about speed. Joke 2. You picture showing up after 50 years away, only to find your favorite sandwich shop replaced by a laser yoga studio. Scientists still debate whether these effects could be leveraged for practical deep space travel if humanity could use time dilation as a kind of one-way ticket into the far future. It would solve some problems of cosmic distance but create others. Every trip would be a personal leap forward, but a goodbye to the world you left. The physics is solid, the ethics and emotions are less so. You glance again at the feed from the station. They wave, but now their gestures seem hurried, compressed, like a film running just slightly too fast. Your own hand waves back in what must seem painfully slow to them. You're both right. That's relativity's quiet mischief. It doesn't demand one truth. It accommodates them all as long as they're consistent in their own frames. Joke 3. You briefly consider starting a long-distance relationship with someone back there after all. Fewer shared seconds might mean fewer arguments, but it's probably not the romantic hack you're hoping for. The cabin lighting dims to a late evening glow, not because you told it to, but because your mind is easing into the rhythm of stretched time. You find yourself counting seconds just to feel them pass. 1, 2, 3. The air between counts feels thicker, heavier, as if the numbers themselves are wading through syrup. Maybe it's just your imagination, but maybe that's what it's like to live on the wrong side of universal agreement. You think back to that equation and realize it's more than math. It's a conversation between you and the universe. The faster you go, the more you're asking time to bend for you. And time, polite but firm, says yes, but at a cost. It will stretch for you, but it will also stretch the distance between you and everything else is now. This is the first real taste of the bargain. If you push further, the difference will grow until clocks outside your ship are spinning like roulette wheels while yours refuses to hurry. And somewhere ahead lies the moment when your clock seems to stop altogether from their perspective. A moment that is, paradoxically, just another second for you. Breathe. The hum is steady. The clock in your palm is still moving. And for now, that's enough. We're just getting started. You hold the clock a little tighter, because what's coming next isn't just a slow drift in perception, it's the longest second you'll ever know. It begins innocently. Your ship coasts at a velocity so close to light speed that the outside universe's events begin to stack up like unread emails. The station you left behind is still broadcasting, but their messages seem compressed, faster. Voices sped up just enough to sound like they're hurrying through the lines of a play before the curtain drops. Inside your ship, though, your second hand moves with the patience of an old librarian shelving books by candlelight. You tap the face and realize nothing's broken. This is the paradox. One heartbeat for you might contain centuries outside. Science fact. Placed gently on the arm of your chair, at 9,999%, the speed of light, 1 year aboard your ship, would correspond to thousands of years passing for a stationary observer. Time dilation scales in a non-linear way. The closer you get to CCC, the more extreme the effect becomes. This is why relativistic travel is sometimes called a time machine to the future. It's not fiction. It's a measured consequence of space-time geometry. Odd fact. In 1971, the Haefel-Keating experiment flew atomic clocks around the world on commercial airliners. When compared to stationary clocks, the airborne ones had shifted by nanoseconds, tiny but measurable. If you stretch that principle to cosmic velocities, those nanoseconds become years, decades, epochs. The emotional truth arrives like a quiet ache. You imagine being able to step out of your ship after what feels like a weekend away and see the city you grew up in replaced by forests, or glaciers, or towers so tall they vanish into cloud. Your friends might be dust, their descendants, strangers who look at you like a story come to life. It's not just that time has passed differently, it's that you've lived in an almost arrogant bubble, carrying your seconds with you while the rest of the universe ran ahead. Joke 1. You'd be the ultimate procrastinator. Don't worry, I'll do it in a second, and return after the deadline has been extinct for centuries. You begin to feel the seconds themselves stretching under your skin. Not metaphorically, you're still you, but the awareness is unsettling. A light from a distant quasar reaches you in what feels like moments, but you know it's been traveling for billions of years. Time outside has lost its politeness. It's rushing to catch up with your stubborn ship and failing. Scientists still debate how this would feel subjectively. Would you notice the stretch at all? Or would you only know because the world outside seems to be accelerating into an incomprehensible blur? Some argue you wouldn't feel anything, your internal processes would stay normal to you. Others say there might be a strange sense of insulation, like watching a movie while the theater around you is collapsing in fast forward. Joke 2. You wonder if you could use this as an excuse for missing a family reunion. Technically, I was gone for less than an hour, Aunt Linda. The view outside your craft shifts. Galaxies no longer seem to move in a stately dance. They streak, distort, blue shift into ultraviolet fury ahead of you, while those behind red shift into invisibility. Space isn't just a backdrop anymore, it's being reshaped by your motion. This is not just the Doppler effect you learned about in school. It's a full reweaving of reality's texture. You find yourself thinking about memory. If a second here equals decades there, could you become a witness to the deep future without ever feeling the weight of its passing? And if so, would that be a gift or a wound? History becomes a time-lapse. Kingdoms rise and crumble, languages are born and die, entire species appear and vanish, and you experience it all between sips of tea. Joke 3. You picture yourself trying to explain the internet to a civilization 3,000 years ahead. It was like telepathy, but mostly for cat pictures. The hum of your ship slows in your perception, though it's steady in reality. The artificial gravity beneath your feet feels more like a suggestion than a law. You wonder if the universe feels the same about its own rules, that it can bend them when the right conditions are met, but never quite break them without consequences. The longest second keeps unfolding. If you could somehow see both your frame and theirs side by side, you'd see their centuries crammed into your blink. And yet, you're here, warm in your chair, fingertips on your clock, aware that this gap between you and them will only grow as you press the accelerator. That's the real caution, hiding in the romance of near-light travel. Every step forward in velocity is also a step away from the world that made you. It's not just distance, it's time pulling you apart. Breathe. Let this second stretch, and then let it go. The next stretch of the journey will play a trick not just on the ticking of the clock, but on the very shape of space between where you are and where you're going. You've been watching the clock so intently that it takes a moment to realize the real magic isn't in the ticking. It's in the way the space ahead has begun to change shape. At first, it's subtle. The stars on your forward horizon seem a little closer together, as if the night sky has been nudged and the constellations compressed by some invisible hand. But then, as you push the engines, the effect deepens. The corridors of space itself contract. To you, the journey feels faster not because your ship is breaking rules, but because the rules are bending to meet you. This is length contraction, another unavoidable consequence of approaching light speed. The closer VVV is to CCC, the more dramatic the contraction. At 99.9% light speed, a 10 light-year journey might feel like just 4.5 light-years to you. Odd fact. Particles in accelerators like the Large Hadron Collider regularly experience this effect. Protons traveling near CCC see the 27-kilometer accelerator ring as only a fraction of that length in their own frame. The machine hasn't shrunk, their perception of space has changed because of their speed. The cabin feels subtly different now. The space in front of your chair seems to lean toward you, like a hallway sloping downhill. The void ahead is no longer an endless static canvas, it's an elastic sheet pulling your target closer. And yet, your instruments insist the outside universe hasn't moved any faster toward you than usual. Both realities are true, and relativity keeps them from arguing. Joke 1. You imagine using this effect for errands. Sorry I'm late, but the grocery store contracted halfway here. There's a tenderness to the illusion. Length contraction doesn't just help you, it also robs you. The stars ahead may be closer in your frame, but the same effect makes the space behind you stretch out, as though home is retreating faster than you can keep it in your mind. You can't shrink one side without stretching the other. Scientists still debate the experience of length contraction. Some say it would be imperceptible to you without measuring instruments, that the shrinking is only visible when comparing frames. Others argue that, in a direct visual sense, the sky ahead would distort in a way your brain might interpret as strange, claustrophobic, or eerily tunnel-like. This is tied to the terral rotation, a relativistic optical effect that makes contracted objects appear rotated rather than simply squashed. Joke 2. You picture showing up at a faraway planet and the locals saying, "You're early," and you shrug. Your place was shorter than you advertised. Your hands rest on the console, feeling the vibration shift as if the ship is gliding down a funnel of space-time. The stars ahead seem brighter too, their light blue shifting toward higher energies. You're not imagining that. It's the Doppler effect in full swing, turning distant suns into fierce points of light. Behind you, the opposite is happening. Their glow slides into red and fades into darkness. Forward is the future. Behind is a fading record. The emotional weight of this sinks in. The closer you move to light speed, the more you exist in a world entirely of your own. Distances no longer match the maps you knew. Time no longer matches the clocks you left, and the shape of reality warps itself around your motion. You aren't just moving through space, you're changing the meaning of it. Joke 3. You think about real estate listings in your frame, oceanfront property, only 2 light years away. Asterisk, results may vary by velocity. Here's the strange comfort. This isn't cheating. You haven't broken the speed of light, haven't outrun the laws of physics. You've worked with them, and in return, they've made the journey easier from your perspective. If your destination was impossibly far at rest, it now feels like a neighbor leaning over the fence to talk. And yet, there's a cost lurking in the beauty. When you arrive, if you slow down and let space-time expand again to its normal shape, you'll realize the outside world didn't contract at all. It was you who carried the distortion. For them, you traveled the full, brutal distance and the decades that took place during it. For you, it was a shortcut. For them, it was a wait. The corridor ahead narrows just a little more, and you can feel the next part of the journey pressing close. What happens when this speed limit starts looking less like a wall and more like a locked gate, one that might have a key if you dare to look for it? The space ahead feels like it's holding its breath. You've been thinking of the speed of light as a brick wall, hard, absolute, unyielding. But the longer you travel at these nearly impossible speeds, the more you begin to suspect it's not a wall at all. It's a gate. And gates, in human stories, are meant to open if you know how to knock. The instruments on your console glare back at you with numbers that refuse to climb past a certain point. Your velocity creeps towards CCC, but each decimal place costs you exponentially more energy. Push a little faster, and the ship feels heavier. Push harder still, and you realize it's not just the ship, it's you. Mass and energy are whispering their private joke. EMC2E equals MC2. EMC2 means speed makes you more massive in the eyes of anyone watching, and accelerating that new, heavier you takes more and more energy. At light speed, you'd need infinite energy, and infinite energy is famously absent from the universe's menu. Science fact. Even photons, particles of light, have zero rest mass. That's the only reason they can travel at CCC without breaking physics. Anything with mass, no matter how small, needs more and more energy as it gets closer to CCC, and the curve toward infinity is steep enough to make the whole endeavor feel like climbing a vertical cliff. Odd fact. The fastest human-made object so far is the Parker Solar Probe, moving at about 192 kilometers per second relative to the Sun, fast enough to get from New York to Tokyo in under a minute. Impressive, but still only about 0.06, 4% of light speed. Even our boldest machines are crawling in relativity's eyes. Your ship hums with the strain, and for the first time you can feel the engine's protest as something more than vibration. It's a low, almost animal growl. Space outside your windows narrows to a tunnel of violent blue light, the result of extreme Doppler shift, and behind you, the universe is falling into a soundless red haze. You're trapped between 2 versions of reality, the possible and the forbidden. Joke 1. You wonder if the speed of light has a bouncer standing at the door, checking IDs and dress codes. Sorry, you're too massive to come in. And yet, the gate idea lingers. What if there's a way around rather than through? Science fiction has been dining out on that question for decades. Alcubierre's warp drive proposal, based on stretching space-time behind you and contracting it ahead, skirts the speed limit by never moving through space faster than light. Instead, it moves space itself. Wormholes, if they exist, could link distant points instantly without requiring you to travel between them at all. Neither has been proven possible, but the mathematics doesn't slam the door entirely. Scientists still debate whether these loopholes violate deeper principles, like causality or energy conservation. Exotic matter, the kind needed to make a warp bubble, has never been observed. Wormholes might collapse the moment they form, or be unstable unless fed impossible amounts of negative energy. The gate, if it exists, might be locked with a key we don't yet understand or locked forever. Joke 2. You imagine asking for exotic matter at a hardware store and being handed a bag of glitter and a shrug. As you drift at the edge of this invisible barrier, there's a strange feeling of reverence, not frustration reverence. You realize that limits like this don't just constrain us, they give the universe its shape. Without them, causality might unravel, events could lose their order, and the story of the cosmos would read like a deck of cards tossed into the wind. Still, your fingers itch at the controls. There's something inherently human about wanting to see what's on the other side of a closed gate. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's arrogance. Maybe it's the suspicion that the impossible is just the universe's way of saying not yet. Joke 3. You think about putting professional gate tester on your resume, right under talks to clocks. The hum steadies, almost like the ship is sighing, knowing you won't push further, at least not yet. You sit back and watch the numbers on your display hold steady, feeling the paradox of being both incredibly fast and still not fast enough. The gate is there, gleaming with the cold light of mathematics, and you're standing in front of it with no key in sight. But you also know something now. A locked gate doesn't mean the journey ends. Sometimes, it just means the road is about to turn in a way you didn't expect. And somewhere along that road, physics is keeping another trick up its sleeve, one that might let you send messages where your body cannot yet go. The engines have cooled to a softer hum, the kind of sound a fridge makes when it's quietly judging you from the kitchen. You've backed off the throttle just enough to feel less like you're headbutting the speed of light, and more like you're hovering near it, circling, waiting. That's when you remember the rumors, the strange thought experiments about what might happen if you could cheat, even just a little. What if you could borrow the energy you need from somewhere else? Physicists would call it superluminal travel. You call it the world's most expensive daydream. The trouble is, the price tag isn't just high, it's impossible. As you nudge closer to CCC, the energy required rises steeply, like the world's rudest staircase, by the time you're 99. Odd fact. Certain quantum phenomena, like quantum tunneling, can make particles appear to move faster than light, but no actual information is traveling superluminally. The speed is more of a mathematical quirk than a loophole in causality. Nature teases, but it doesn't break its own code. You imagine it anyway. A sudden flash, your ship surges forward, and you've done it, you've crossed the limit. There's no resistance, no shattering sound, just a dizzying rearrangement of how the universe behaves. Space behind you goes wrong. Stars blur into patterns you can't pass. Ahead, distances don't shrink anymore, they invert. Your navigation screen has no idea where to put anything. It's not built to handle faster than light coordinates. Joke 1. You picture calling tech support. Hi, yes, my map thinks my destination is behind me now, and also inside my left shoe. How? The more you think about it, the more it feels like skipping ahead in a book without reading the middle chapters. Sure, you get to the end faster, but you've broken the rhythm of the story. Physics runs on rhythm, cause leads to effect, and the beat holds the melody together. If you can move faster than light, you can in theory get somewhere before the light from your departure does, which means you could arrive before you left, which means causality, our precious this leads to that, takes a nosedive into chaos. Scientists still debate whether there's any way to manage that without unraveling reality. Theoretical constructs like closed time-like curves appear in certain solutions to Einstein's equations, but most physicists think they're mathematical curiosities rather than viable engineering blueprints. Exotic energy conditions, negative mass, space-time warping, these are more like folklore wrapped in algebra. Joke 2. You think about naming your ship the Loan Shark because all this borrowed energy would come with interest you could never pay back. But there's another possibility, whispered in conference halls and buried in research papers. Maybe the universe already has a mechanism for bypassing the speed limit, just not for people. Quantum entanglement allows particles to share a state instantaneously over vast distances. No messages, no physical stuff travels faster than light, but correlations appear instantly. It's not travel, exactly, but it's a reminder that the universe is stranger than the traffic laws suggest. You rest your hands on the console and think about what borrowing would mean in human terms. It's like taking a shortcut through someone's backyard. Without asking, maybe you'll save time, but maybe you'll trip their motion sensor and end up with a garden gnome embedded in your shin. The cosmic version of that is accidentally tearing open a hole in causality big enough for paradoxes to fall through. Joke 3. You imagine explaining to future historians that you didn't mean to cause the Great Temporal Pancake incident, it just happened while you were in a hurry. The cabin feels warmer now, the hum closer, as if the ship itself is leaning in to hear your decision. Push for the impossible and risk the debt you can't repay, or accept that the gate is locked and find another way to slip a message past it. You're not ready to decide yet, but you do know this. The next experiment doesn't involve moving your body, it involves sending a signal and seeing if you can get a message to arrive before you send it. The idea starts as a flicker, a small, dangerous what if that you'd normally swat away before it hatches. But here, in the dim hum of the cabin, it feels too tempting. If you can't move yourself faster than light, maybe you can send a message, something small, weightless. A signal that slips past the rules like a fox through a broken fence. You picture it, a pulse of light, or maybe radio waves, flung forward at superluminal speed, leaping ahead of the very photons that left your ship at the same moment. If it works, it will reach its destination before it should exist. And if that happens, it might arrive before you even send it. That's where the headaches start. Science fact. Special relativity says that faster-than-light communication could allow signals to be received in the past in some reference frames. This isn't a glitch, it's built into the math. The Lorentz transformations, which relate space and time for moving observers, show that exceeding CCC can flip the order of cause and effect. Odd fact. There's a famous thought experiment called the tachyonic anti-telephone, in which two people use hypothetical faster-than-light particles, tachyons, to send messages to each other's past. If such a system existed, you could, in theory, warn yourself not to send the first message. The loop collapses into paradox. You turn to the console and draft a test signal. Just a short one. Hello from tomorrow. You aim it toward a receiver station far ahead, where it will be logged and time-stamped. But you keep thinking, what if the log shows it arriving before now? What if it shows up before you even press send? Joke 1. You consider sending by lottery ticked to your past self, but decide the physics police might consider that insider trading. You hesitate over the button, imagining the consequences. A universe without causality is not a gentle place. Cause and effect are like the load-bearing beams in a building. You can't pull them out without the whole structure collapsing. Without them, history becomes slippery. Events lose their anchoring, and the very concept of before and after blurs until you can't tell which way time is flowing. Scientists still debate whether quantum mechanics offers any secret handshake here. Quantum entanglement produces instant correlations, but it can't transmit usable information faster than light. It's like two dice, always showing the same number, no matter how far apart they are, but you can't control the roll. So entanglement can't be used to send a message back in time. Nature's loopholes are carefully sewn shut. Joke 2. You imagine explaining that to your mum. No, I can't call you before I called you. That would destroy the universe. Also, I'm out of data. Ugh. You press send. The signal leaps away, or at least your instruments say it does. You can't see it directly, it's moving beyond even your sunbeam's arrogant pace, but you can check the timestamp once the reply comes in. The reply arrives instantly. Not fast, in the normal sense instant. And when you check the log, you feel your stomach drop. The station received your hello from tomorrow, exactly 12 minutes before you sent it. In their frame, the past has already been touched by your future. You sit back, letting the weight of that sink in. If you push this further, you could tell someone about an event before it happens, potentially changing it. And if they act on that, the very reason you sent the message might vanish. That's the classic grandfather paradox in miniature, not killing an ancestor, but killing the reason for the signal itself. Joke 3. You picture the universe popping up an error message. Causality loop detected. Please restart reality. The hum of the ship seems deeper now, as if the air itself knows you've crossed into dangerous territory. You realize the next logical step, sending a message to your own past, wouldn't just be risky, it would be rewriting your own timeline, and you're not sure you trust your past self with that kind of power. You power down the transmitter, fingers lingering on the switch. The experiment worked, but at a cost you can't quite calculate. Because if information can move like this, maybe you're not the only one doing it. Maybe the whispers of impossible signals have been threading through history all along, shaping it in ways we'll never be able to untangle. And somewhere in the folds of that possibility lies an even stranger one. If you can send a message back, maybe you can meet yourself before you've even spoken the words. It begins as a faint, absurd image. Two versions of you in the same cabin, one leaning against the console, the other pacing by the viewport, arguing over who gets to finish the sentence. You laugh it off at first, but the longer you think about what you just did with the transmitter, the less absurd it feels. If you can send a signal to the past, and if that past, you can act on it immediately, then in principle, you and that earlier self could end up occupying the same now. You try to picture it logically, but logic melts into spaghetti here. Imagine your future self sending you a warning. Don't start the engines at 14:03. You obey, but then the reason for sending the message disappears because you never started the engines. Your future self never had a reason to warn you. And if the warning was never sent, well, we've tied the knot so tight that even time can't slip through. Science fact. This is the essence of a causal loop. In theoretical physics, closed time-like curves are mathematical structures in space-time that allow such loops. They appear in solutions to Einstein's field equations like Gödel's rotating universe or the Kerr black hole, but whether they could exist in reality is still an open question. Odd fact. In 1991, physicist David Deutsch proposed a way for quantum mechanics to handle these paradoxes without breaking logic. The consistency condition. In simple terms, events in the loop are self-consistent. Whatever happens inside the loop must be compatible with the loop existing in the first place. No matter what you do, you can't create an outright contradiction. Your mind drifts into the emotional weight of it. Meeting yourself might sound like science fiction fun, but it's also unnerving. Would you recognize you? Would the you from 12 minutes ago have the same calm you have now? Or would they look at you like an intruder wearing their skin? Joke 1. You imagine the awkward small talk. So, been up to much? Mostly what you've been up to. You walk to the rear of the cabin, running your hand along the bulkhead, and wonder if your earlier self might already be here, quietly tucked in one of the shadowed corners. If causality can loop, then any moment could be shared by multiple versions of you. You might even be your own visitor without realizing it yet. Scientists still debate whether any form of superluminal travel or communication could create these loops without tearing the fabric of space-time in dangerous ways. Some say quantum mechanics, with its probabilistic nature, could keep reality fuzzy enough to avoid contradictions. Others believe the universe would simply forbid such loops from forming. Stephen Hawking even called it the chronology protection conjecture. Joke 2. You think about the universe as a stern librarian. No time loops in the reading room, please. You decide to test the smallest version of the idea. You send another signal this time, a brief tone, and a timestamp back to your own console exactly 5 minutes earlier. Then you wait. The tone plays immediately. You check the clock 5 minutes before you pressed send, which means, in your own timeline, you've just received something you haven't yet done. And now that you have the idea, you must send it in 5 minutes, or the loop will break. You've become the custodian of your own cause. Joke 3. You realize you've just scheduled a meeting with yourself, and you already know you'll be late. The air in the cabin feels heavier, not in a scary way, but as if reality itself is standing a little closer than before, listening to see if you'll keep your promise. In 4 minutes, you'll press the button and complete the loop. If you don't know what will happen. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. You sit back in your chair and let the seconds count down, feeling like you're in conversation with the most stubborn, intimate part of the universe. You're not just living in time anymore, you're playing catch with it. And if that's possible, then perhaps the next step isn't just messages or shadows of yourself. Perhaps the next step is a meeting that's not bound by any before or after at all. 4 minutes pass. You press the button, completing the loop, and the moment feels like dropping the final piece into a puzzle you didn't know you'd been building. The cabin hums the same, the stars outside burn the same, and yet, you can't shake the sense that something in the background fabric of the universe just relaxed. The loop is closed. No contradictions. No alarms. No divine librarian tapping you on the shoulder. You sit there, fingers still on the console, and notice something odd. For the first time in this whole journey, the space around you feels aware of you, not in a mystical way, but in the way a room feels different when you know someone else is in it, even if they're just in the next room over. You realize it's not awareness at all, it's your own mind, beginning to sense the strain you've been putting on the rules. Cause and effect aren't gone, but they're bending. You think about dominoes. In normal life, one falls, then another, and the line progresses neatly. At your speed, with your tricks, the dominoes are starting to wobble out of order, some tipping before they're even touched. You haven't broken the game yet, but you can see how thin the lines are between a cosmos that makes sense and one that feels like a jigsaw puzzle tossed into the air. Science fact. Relativity doesn't just discourage faster-than-light travel, it binds it into the equations that describe space-time itself. The structure of Minkowski space-time places the speed of light as the boundary between time-like intervals, where cause can affect effect, and space-like intervals, where events are forever causally disconnected. Crossing that boundary isn't just illegal, it changes the mathematical type of the path you're on. Odd fact. In certain hypothetical spacetimes, like those containing rotating black holes, Kerr metrics, there may be regions where closed time-like curves naturally occur. In these regions, you could, in theory, loop back to your own past without exceeding the speed of light at all, but getting there would mean surviving extreme gravitational forces and navigating unstable geometry. It's the cosmic equivalent of balancing on a razor blade while juggling live eels. The hum of your ship dips in tone, and you realize you've been holding your breath not from fear, but from the delicate tension of walking the edge. Every time you test these limits, you invite the universe to push back, and so far, it's only been polite. You suspect that politeness has an expiration date. Joke 1. You imagine opening your mailbox one day to find a ticket from the Department of Universal Continuity for reckless manipulation of space-time without a permit. It hits you then. The speed limit isn't just a mechanical cap, it's a safeguard. It keeps causality from unraveling, keeps stories from collapsing into chaos. Without it, every action could have infinite conflicting consequences, and the past could become as unstable as the weather. You picture a future where history books constantly rewrite themselves, where you can't be sure the person you loved yesterday even existed today. The beauty of the limit is that it keeps reality coherent enough for meaning to exist. Scientists still debate whether these rules are absolute or whether there are emergent laws beneath them. Laws we haven't yet uncovered that could allow certain exceptions. Some theories of quantum gravity hint that the fabric of space-time might be granular at the smallest scales. And if that's true, maybe the speed limit is a large-scale effect, not a fundamental one. But for now, no experiment has cracked the barrier. Joke 2. You imagine the universe whispering, "Sure, you can go faster than light, as long as you enjoy existing in 17 dimensions at once." The more you think about it, the more it feels like the cosmos itself has a kind of patience. You can press against the rules, distort them a little, send whispers to the past, even play tag with yourself. But if you press too far, you'll find out what happens when that patience runs out, and you're starting to think it wouldn't be pretty. Joke 3. You suspect the punishment would be less cosmic lightning bolt and more eternal paperwork in a bureaucracy that speaks only in paradoxes. You lean back, letting your chair rock slightly in the artificial gravity. The stars outside are silent, but in that silence you sense the fragility of the whole arrangement. Without the limit, there'd be no way to distinguish cause from effect, story from static. You're not just moving fast, you're tugging at the stitching that holds the universe together. And somewhere ahead, you suspect, there's a version of this game where the stitching has already come loose, where timelines bleed together and patience has run thin. You're not sure you want to see it, but you're starting to believe you might. You let the chair rock once, twice, and the aftertaste of that closed loop still lingers like finishing a sentence that started speaking you. The hum keeps you company, and in that hush, your mind reaches for a wilder rumor, the kind whispered in grad student hallways and sci-fi paperbacks. If you can't outrun light as you, maybe you can hitch a ride with something that already lives beyond it. The word arrives with a little theatrical flourish tachyons, a name that sounds like it should wear chrome boots and a cape, even though, on paper, it's just a hypothesis with sharp edges. You picture a highway only the restless can see, a thin silver lane skimming the cosmos where the speed limit signs face the wrong way. On that road, going slower is the danger. If tachyons exist, they never cross down through light speed. The barrier at CCC is a cliff they cannot descend. They would be born superluminal and stay superluminal, forever allergic to the ordinary. You lean toward the window and try to imagine what the stars look like to a creature that can't help but get there first. Science fact, tucked into your sleeve. In the simplest field theories, tachyons behave as if they have an imaginary rest mass, mathematically, minor as 2, 0 meter, 2, 0 square meters, 0. That doesn't mean fake. It means the equations push their allowed velocities to be greater than CCC. Their energy and momentum turn the usual relationship sideways, so the slower a tachyon goes, still faster than light, the more energy it would need. Speeding up would cost less, an economy built for ghosts. Odd fact to hold in your pocket. People often point at the blue glow of a nuclear reactor and say, "Look, that's faster than light." They're not entirely wrong. Charged particles there can outrun light in water, which is slower than light in a vacuum. The glow is Cherenkov radiation, a sonic boom of photons. It's beautiful, it's real, and it's not cheating. Nobody outruns vacuum CCC. Still, the color feels like a postcard from the edge. You imagine stepping onto that tachyon highway anyway, if not with your body, then with your attention and everything in your cabin tilts a little. On this road, cause and effect aren't politely cued. They mill around like overstimulated pigeons. Start here, finish there, and only later discover you began. You reach for a knob on the console, just to feel something solid under your hand. Joke 1. If tachyons had a gym, the treadmills would run away from the runners, which frankly sounds like the cardio upgrade we all deserve. You talk to yourself the way you do when the night has grown long and honest. What do you actually want from faster than light? To arrive earlier? To escape the grief of waiting? To undo a choice that still glows hot? Tachyons, if they're more than clever algebra, wouldn't promise comfort. They'd promise rearrangement. Your message might leave after it arrives. Your apology might precede your mistake. The ache that makes you press the transmitter might evaporate the moment you do. Scientists still debate whether tachyons belong anywhere but the wastebasket marked beautiful monsters. In quantum field theory, a tachyonic sign can also mean a system perched on an unstable peak, more a warning label than a particle passport. Some versions of string theory once flirted with tachyonic modes, only to cure them by finding a stable vacuum. Others argue that if truly superluminal quanta existed, they'd let you build paradox machines, tachyonic anti-telephones, so nature almost certainly forbids them or hides them where they can't misbehave. Your ship answers none of this. It just breathes. The forward stars smear toward a needlepoint tunnel, and you wonder how perception itself would cope with the highway. At ordinary near-eye light speeds, you learned about Terrell rotation and Doppler glare objects appearing skewed, blue shift, setting the front sky on fire. But a being born in the tachyon lane would never look down at our world from a pedestrian crosswalk in time. It would surf space-like intervals, skimming events that never touch, tasting a cosmos where before and after are local recipes, not hard rules. Joke 2. You picture posting a classified ad, WTB, slightly used tachyon. Must arrive yesterday. No paradoxes, please. You reach for a pen and draw a light cone on a scrap, the simple lantern of cause and effect every relativity textbook loves. Inside the cone, signals can travel. Outside, they can't. Tachyons would live outside that cone, tracing lines the rest of us can't follow. You don't envy them, exactly. You just want to know whether the universe ever tried such a flavor of being, and if so, whether it kept the recipe. Here's the heart tug you weren't expecting. If tachyons existed and you could talk to them, ridiculous, and yet, what could they tell you about patience? To them, your waiting is a quaint ritual. To you, their haste would look like vandalism on the story of things. Maybe that's the secret social contract of reality. The speed of light is the compromise that lets different kinds of meaning share a room without shouting each other down. Joke 3. You imagine a support group. Hi, I'm a tachyon, and I have a problem. Hi, tachyon. I keep arriving early to surprise parties and ruining them. You set the pen down and let your hand rest there, feeling the page like a heartbeat. The temptation is to treat tachyons as an escape hatch. If they're real, then surely you can piggyback a message, bend a plan, dodge a regret. But the wiser thought slips in, maybe the point of the tachyon myth is to teach respect for the stitching you've been tugging. If there are roads beyond the limit, they might not be ours. Not everything the equations permit is a life you would want. Scientists still debate whether the speed limit is negotiable in the deeper theories. Some hints in condensed matter systems quasi-particles. Effective fields play mimicry with superluminality while keeping causality intact. In cosmology, space-time itself expanded faster than light during inflation without breaking local rules. These are reminders that the universe can do elaborate choreography, motion but not messaging, speed but not story-breaking. You close your eyes, and the highway in your mind fades to a pale trace, like a trail a child draws in air with a sparkler just before it dies. You will not chase it tonight. You'll put the transmitter to sleep, let the cabin lights fall to their warmest amber, and let the cone of your own causality feel safe again. There's strength in staying inside the lantern that fits you. Before the hum finally carries you toward drowsiness, you tuck one last truth beneath your tongue like a lozenge. Even if nothing ever rides the tachyon highway, the thought of it reveals the borderlands of your map. It shows you where stories could come undone, which helps you love the places where they hold. The speed of light isn't only a number, it's a promise that your moments can line up into a life. The ship sighs. Or maybe you do. Outside, a faint star blinks the way a lighthouse does when it's sure of its shore. You match your breath to it. You'll keep to your lane for now. Soon the journey will twist again toward messengers that arrive too early, shadows that appear before their owners, and the theatre tricks reality plays when you stare too long at its curtains. But first, rest your hand, let the pen roll, and listen to the steady stitch of seconds threading you gently through the night. The pen from last night is still where you left it, a slim black line against the console like a miniature event horizon, and when you lift it, a faint afterimage lingers light's way of saying it was here a heartbeat ago. That afterimage is your on-ramp, not to another forbidden highway, but to a weirder boulevard where the world plays a card called appearance. You're about to chase a rumor that shadows can arrive before the things that cast them, that effects can seem to outrun their causes, stagecraft so convincing you almost clap. You dim the cabin to a dusk glow and imagine a lighthouse on a long, dark coast, sweeping its beam across distant cliffs. If that beam paints a spot of light 100 kilometers away, and you whip the lamp fast enough, the bright spot could skitter along the cliff faster than light would travel in a straight line between 2 points. There, a thing, The moving spot crossing the rock face at superluminal speed. Did a physical object exceed CAS number? Did any message hitch a ride on that sprinting spot? Also no. The only traveler here is geometry, and geometry doesn't carry postcards. Science fact, tucked neatly beside your T, a moving effect can exceed light speed without any information or matter doing so. A classic example is a laser pointer aimed at the moon. Pivot it quickly, and the red dot could slide across the lunar surface faster than CCC. No single photon travels sideways at that speed. The dot is just successive photons illuminating successive places. Nothing causal hops from A to B faster than light. The dot is an emergent parade, each marcher obeying the limit while the parade's pattern seems to rush. You flip your ship's external projector to stripe mode, painting a faint bar of light across a nearby dust sheet. Rotate the projector, and the bar sweeps. Push faster, and the sweep becomes a slick ghost, a bright edge racing the dark. Your instruments report the obvious. At sufficiently large distances and angles, the locus of illumination can outrun light, with no rules broken. You're choreographing appearances. You feel a little like a magician who keeps his sleeves rolled up to show there's nothing hidden, just clever angles and the patience of photons. Joke 1. You think about starting a business called relativistic house painting. We don't move faster than light, but your paint roller's shadow absolutely will. Odd fact to pocket, astronomers have filmed superluminal motion in the jets of certain quasars. Gas knots in those jets appear to move across the sky faster than light because they're angled nearly toward us and moving close to CCC. Projection and light travel time effects conspire to sell the illusion. Nobody's cheating the limit. The show is just edited by geometry and timing. The universe's favorite film crew. You try on the phrase, shadows that arrive first, and realize it happens on kitchen tables too. Put two scissors blades together and close them fast. The crossing point where the blades meet zips along the edge, sometimes faster than any blade tip can move. That crossing point can reach the end of the scissors before the blades themselves do. It's not a thing, not a particle, just a relationship sliding along an interface. A shadow, an intersection, a spotlight's kiss patterns can sprint, causes still walk. Scientists still debate the most intuitive way to teach this without licensing misconceptions. Phase velocity in a medium can exceed CCC. The ripples of a wave train's crests can outrun the envelope. But the signal-bearing front velocity, the very first non-zero disturbance, remains capped at CCC. Experiments with fast light in anomalously dispersive media famously showed pulse peaks exiting before they should, but careful analysis finds that information still refuses to jump the gun. Nature loves a flourish. It does not love broken mail routes. You lean your face closer to the viewport until your breath fogs a small crescent. What unnerves you isn't the trick itself, it's how easily your storytelling brain buys it. If a shadow lands early, your mind drafts a cause to match it. The heart is a marvelous liar in service of coherence. That's not an insult, it's survival. You've stitched your days together by ordering moments into lines. Now the universe offers you a moving intersection point and dares you to call it destiny. Joke 2. You promise yourself you won't text anyone, "I'm on the way," based solely on the speed of your hallway shadow. The projector's beam sweeps again. On your readout, the illuminated front on dust sheet alpha appears to dash around the arc faster than any single photon's lateral step. But to send a message to the far end, you'd still need to modulate the light in a way that only reaches that spot after the photons have had their lawful commute. No early mail, no precognitive telegrams, just choreography. You're not disillusioned, you're relieved. The speed limit holds, and with it the quiet dignity of cause preceding effect. You think about life's own superluminal illusions. A rumor can seem to appear everywhere at once. No single whisper traveling faster than sound, just many mouths repeating. A trend looks instantaneous, but it's thousands of local decisions synchronizing. Love can feel like it arrived before you met every book and song laying groundwork you didn't know was there. None of those outrun time. They're just patterns dressed as messengers. The distinction matters when you're lonely at 2 a.m. and would give anything for a reply that arrives early. Patterns are not promises. Scientists still debate whether exotic space-time geometries could produce genuine causal signals, the kind that make arrive before you send more than appearance. Chronology protection, energy conditions, quantum inequalities, there's a whole defensive line of theory keeping paradox off the field. Yet the conversations continue, careful and stubborn. In physics, a good still isn't dismissal. It's an invitation to refine your questions. Joke 3. You imagine a weather app that predicts yesterday's rain with 100% accuracy. Finally, a forecast you can trust. The cabin light warms half a shade, and you let yourself feel the soft moral of the trick. When you're desperate, illusions shaped like shortcuts are intoxicating. A moving shadow gives you the thrill of speed without the responsibility of motion, but you can't hug a shadow, and you can't anchor meaning to a spot that's only ever a new place wearing the same passing light. If your life is going to change, the message will travel the old-fashioned way, through choices, across time, one photon, one step, one yes after another. You power down the projector, and the dust sheet fades to honest dark. In that dark, a quieter idea glows. Maybe these theatrical edge cases are the universe teaching you sleight of hand and skepticism at once, how to delight in the flourish, and then politely check the sleeves. To live here is to nurse wonder without surrendering discernment, to be charmed but not conned. You leave a note to your future self on the console, not sent by any paradox engine, just saved as a draft. When you're tempted to chase apparitions, remember the lighthouse. The spot can sprint, but the beam still turns by the clock. It's corny. You keep it anyway. You're not trying to outrun light tonight. You're learning to read it. Beyond the glass, a small, stubborn star brightens a hair, as if nodding from an impossible distance. Reach the slow way by being patient, by staying lit. You match your breathing to its steady twinkle and feel the ship's hum braid with your pulse, the simplest duet in a complicated world. The next turn will be stranger, time running backward, but only for you, perhaps, and only in the language your own clock speaks. For now, fold the projector's arm, uncurl your fingers, and let the room be exactly as slow as it needs to be. It happens quietly. No klaxon, no glitch in the readouts, just a slow suspicion that something has turned around inside you. You glance at your wristwatch, then at the console chronometer, and for the first time in this long journey, they don't just disagree about the pace, they disagree about the direction. The ship's clock is counting upward as always, steady and loyal, but your own watch's second-hand ticks backward. At first you think it's fatigue, or maybe some strange mechanical failure in microgravity. But you tap the crystal and watch the hand retreat another second, as if it's afraid of where it was going. And you feel it not in your head, not in the air, but in your bones. A faint rewinding, like your pulse is running a short film in reverse, frame by frame. Science. Fact. In general relativity, time reversal, for a single observer, isn't a normal feature of our universe's space-time. It would require flipping your world line's orientation in the time dimension. Certain hypothetical particles, like the CPT mirror of our own matter, might appear to run backward in time from our perspective. Even in particle physics, antimatter can be described mathematically as matter moving backward in time, though in practice it behaves perfectly forward when it's in your pocket. Odd fact. In 2019, researchers running quantum simulations on a simple computer system engineered a state that appeared to reverse the evolution of a quantum system for a fraction of a second. It wasn't true time travel, just a trick in the wave function, like unspilling a single drop of ink in water while the ocean keeps moving. The cabin itself feels unbothered by your private reversal. The tea mug floats exactly where you left it. The hum drones on, but your mind is already racing ahead, or rather behind. If this is real, you could experience a moment again. You could unmake the last few seconds, step back into them, and maybe say something different, choose something else. Joke 1. You think about using it to retaste a really good cookie, which probably isn't the noblest use of a cosmological anomaly. You test it. You open the log on your console and jot a single word now. Then you watch as the entry fades, letter by letter, like the word is retreating into a blank page. You check the ship's clock, still forward. You check your watch, still backward. Somehow, your subjective time is decoupling from the ship's. Scientists still debate whether anything like this could be engineered, even in theory. A local reversal of time's arrow would require reversing entropy in your personal frame, lowering the disorder in every atom of your body, while the surrounding universe keeps climbing toward chaos. That's more than improbable. It's a conceptual cliff face. You notice something unsettling as your watch ticks backward. Your memories feel odd. Not erased, but unbraided, like you're walking back along a thread and letting each knot slip loose. You remember putting the pen on the console, then remember holding it, then remember thinking about holding it. Each moment peels away gently, like the undo button in a dream. Joke 2. You decide that if this keeps going, you'll eventually unremember your teenage haircut choices, which would be a mercy. The sensation isn't all pleasant. There's a faint ache, like the tug on your stomach when an elevator starts down, but stretched across your whole sense of self. You realize that if this reversal went far enough, you could unlive portions of your journey, and the risk is that you'd also unknow why you came here in the first place. Your hands hover over the controls. Should you fight it or see where it leads? This might be the only time you ever feel the arrow of time bend against your back. The temptation is enormous. But so is the cost. If you unroll too far, will there be enough forward left to stitch yourself back? Joke 3. You imagine arriving back at your starting point with a note pinned to your coat reading, "Please return to sender postage paid." For now, you let it play. You watch the pen roll back into your hand. The dust sheet outside regains the sweep of last night's light. Your tea mug warms by a degree. It's not dramatic, no grand leaps to earlier years, just a slow, deliberate rewind. You're reminded of rewinding an old cassette tape. The same song, same notes, just in reverse order. A reminder that structure exists even when the flow changes direction. You wonder if this is what some deep, strange patch of space-time would feel like inside a closed time-like curve, perhaps, or near an exotic object whose geometry folds back on itself. You wonder if the you who arrives at the far end of this rewind would even remember the forward journey. And more than anything, you wonder if the universe allowed you to walk backward into a single perfect moment, would you dare stay there? The reversal slows, your watch's hand hesitates, and then like an old river reasserting itself ticks forward again. You inhale, a little sharply, and it feels like you've stepped back onto a moving walkway after standing still. The moment is over. You're forward bound again. But you're left with a thought that's heavier than the pen in your palm. Maybe the arrow of time isn't as single-minded as we pretend. Maybe it wavers, loops, or hesitates in places we haven't yet mapped. And if that's true, there's no telling when you might feel it brush against you again, maybe in the next light year, maybe in the next heartbeat. Your watch ticks forward again, but the cabin feels different now, like you've just walked out of a strange alley into a familiar street and can't quite shake the smell of the alley from your clothes. Outside the viewport, the stars look the same, but there's a subtle emotional shift, as if you've been allowed to peek at the scaffolding holding up the stage of time, and then politely escorted back to your seat. You glance at the external feed showing the station you left behind. The people there are still waving, but something about them feels wrong. You zoom in. Their hair is grayer. Their clothes are different. The station itself has a new array of antennas like metal sunflowers. You check the ship's chronometer. Only a few hours have passed for you since departure. Then you check the timestamp on the station's signal. Nearly 30 years have passed for them. Science fact. This is the twin paradox made real. In special relativity, the twin who travels near light speed ages more slowly than the twin who stays behind. When the traveling twin returns, less time has passed for them than for their sibling. The paradox isn't a contradiction, it's resolved by the asymmetry in their journeys. The traveler changes frames, accelerates, decelerates, turns around, while the stay-at-home twin remains in one inertial frame. Odd fact. In 1971, when physicists flew atomic clocks around the world on commercial airliners, The eastward flying clock lost nanoseconds compared to a stationary one, while the westward flying clock gained them tiny, real proofs that time depends on your path. Scale that up to near-light speeds, and you get decades of difference. The feed from the station keeps playing, and the faces on the other end are strangers. They smile politely, but their eyes don't carry your history. You realize you could call back and speak to the descendants of the people who waved goodbye to you earlier today, and to them you'd be just a footnote from an old logbook. Joke 1. You imagine sending them a postcard, greetings from this morning, and getting back a letter that starts, well, a lot has happened since then. You feel the paradox in your bones. For you, the journey is continuous, just a ribbon of seconds unspooling at your own pace. For them, it's a time-lapse, your face unchanged while their world races forward. The mismatch isn't an error, it's the natural geometry of space-time. Still, it leaves a bruise you can't quite place. You've skipped 30 years without meaning to, and the people you meant to come home to have already gone. Scientists still debate the emotional dimension of relativistic travel. We can predict the physics exactly, but what it means for human relationships, culture, and memory is murkier. Would long-term travelers adapt to the idea of outliving their own context? Or would it hollow them out, making each return a small grief? Joke 2. You wonder if ghosting someone is still called that when you reappear after they've had 3 prime ministers. You think about the strange fairness of it. Time dilation isn't punishing you. It's not even aware of you. It's simply following the path you've chosen. You're the one who stepped on this conveyor belt of seconds, while the rest of the universe took a faster one. The cost isn't paid in fuel or distance, it's paid in the synchronization you've lost. You shut down the feed and lean back, closing your eyes. Your mind drifts to something you read once that, in a sense, all of us are already time travelers moving at different speeds. A climber high on a mountain, feeling less gravity, ages faster than someone at sea level. A passenger in a jet gains or loses microseconds on each flight. We barely notice it, but the universe is always letting our clocks disagree by small, polite margins. You've just turned that polite disagreement into a full-blown argument. Joke 3. You imagine telling your past self, in the future, you'll be the younger one at your high school reunion, and watching them try to do the math. The hum of the ship stays steady, but you can feel the silence under it growing heavier. You're beginning to see the truth behind the thought experiments. Near-light travel isn't just about speed, it's about the slow erosion of your connection to the now you left. Every meter per second closer to CCC is another slice cut out of your shared present with the rest of humanity. Through the viewport, a faint blue star drifts into your path. It's a reminder that your journey is still forward in your own frame, even if the world behind you has leapt ahead. You wonder whether you should turn back now, accept the 30-year gap, or keep going and let centuries pass for them while you sip another cup of tea. Either way, you know this. The next stretch might not just steal your place in the present, it might give you a glimpse of where everything is headed, long after your own story would have naturally ended. The blue star ahead sharpens, a needle point in the dark, and you get the feeling that if you keep your bow aimed just so, you might run straight into the far future. Not a future you belong to the future, the one where the universe has aged far beyond the world you left. The thought prickles the back of your neck. You're not just leaving people behind now. You're starting to think about leaving the entire age of humanity behind. You tap the console, pull up a projection of cosmic time. The simulation plays like a calendar, with pages that can't be flipped slowly. Stars burn out, galaxies drift apart, and the glow of the early universe fades toward red and then to black. You realize that at near-light speed, you could skip forward into that far-off epoch, become a witness to the endgame of everything you've ever known. Science fact. Cosmologists talk about the heat death of the universe, a time when all energy is evenly spread out, no gradients remain to power processes, and entropy reaches its maximum. Stars will have burned their fuel, black holes will slowly evaporate via Hawking radiation, and the cosmos will settle into a thin, cold darkness. On human timescales, this is so distant it's absurd. On yours, if you kept traveling, it could be reachable in a single lifetime. Odd fact, there's a phenomenon called look-back time in astronomy When we look at distant galaxies, we're also looking back in time, because their light has taken millions or billions of years to reach us. But in relativistic travel, you could do the opposite. Move forward so far that your look back shows the universe in a time long after your departure world has gone silent. The idea seduces you for a moment. Imagine stepping out of your ship to see the Milky Way stretched thin and ghostly, its arms unraveling into intergalactic dark. The constellations you grew up with would be gone. Even the sun might be just a faint ember or nothing at all. You could be the sole living witness to sights no one else will ever see. Joke 1. You think about starting the most depressing travel vlog in history. Hey guys, welcome back. Today it's still cold and empty. Aye. But the romance of it cools as you picture the loneliness. It's one thing to return after 30 years and find the faces you knew replaced by strangers. It's another to arrive after billions of years and find there are no faces at all. Even language might be gone. Your ship's logs, once precious records, would be unreadable artifacts to anything still awake. Scientists still debate whether life, any kind of life, could survive into those deep epochs. Some theories imagine civilizations adapting to ever scarcer energy, slowing their thinking to match the cooling universe. Others suggest intelligence itself might wither when there's nothing left to process but the quiet. Either way, it's a gamble you'd be taking alone. Joke 2. You imagine meeting the last alien alive and realizing you have nothing in common except mutual confusion. Your finger hovers over the navigation keys. You could aim for that star, push to the edge of endurance, and turn your life into a time-lapse of the universe itself. Or you could turn back now, reclaim what scraps of your own era you still can. The first option offers a kind of cosmic immortality as far as memory goes. You'd have seen the ending. The second offers human connection, however thinned by decades apart. The hum of the ship takes on a restless quality, as if it's aware you're weighing these futures. You imagine the blue star calling you forward, not out of malice, but because that's what light does. It invites you to chase it. And you know that the moment you decide, you'll either become part of that long, inevitable drift toward entropy, or part of the fragile, fleeting present you left behind. Joke 3. You suspect that if you do go all the way, the only thing left to greet you will be a lone welcome mat orbiting a dead planet. You take your hands off the console and just float there. The decision can wait a few more seconds, at least in your own frame of time. The star ahead gleams with patient indifference. Whether you go to it or not, the future is still out there, and it will still come, whether at the speed of light or the pace of your own pulse. The thought settles heavy and calm. You don't have to see the end to know it's coming, but if you did see it, you'd never unsee it. That's the power and the burden of traveling this close to light's own rhythm. Every choice you make is also a choice about what version of time you'll have to live with. You let the blue star drift off center in the viewport, a quiet rebellion against its pull, and turn your gaze back to the map. The display pulses with destinations, stars, nebulae, clusters, but they're all warped now, squeezed forward by your speed, distances folding like an accordion. You realize you're experiencing the full bloom of relativistic length contraction. It's not just numbers on a chart anymore. It's the map itself rewriting its proportions while you watch. Your target, whatever you pick, will seem closer than it really is in the stationary universe. The farther away it was to begin with, the more aggressively the contraction presses it toward you. At this speed, instant arrival starts to look like a mirage you might actually walk into. This is why a near light-speed traveler could cross to another galaxy in their own lifetime, even though, in the galaxy's frame, tens of thousands of years would pass. Both views are correct, because space-time makes no promises about a single true distance. Odd fact, cosmic rays, high-energy particles from space, regularly hit Earth's atmosphere after journeys from far-off galaxies. In their own relativistic frames, those galaxies may have seemed just a short hop away, even though we measure them as millions of light-years distant. You lean forward, eyes scanning the contracted starfield. It feels a little like walking into a room where the walls keep stepping toward you, friendly, maybe, but intrusive. The illusion of instant arrival is seductive. It whispers of beating the clock without breaking the law. Joke 1. You think about advertising light speed delivery, but hiding the fine print delivery time depends on the customer's frame of reference. But here's the deeper truth. The contraction doesn't just apply to where you're going, it stretches behind you too. Your homeworld, that station, the people you left, they're now far more distant in your perception than they should be. The contraction is directional, biased toward the way you face. Forward collapses, backward retreats. It's a cosmic reminder that speed can make you intimate with the future and a stranger to the past. Scientists still debate whether any practical ship could maintain these speeds without the pilot feeling some strange perceptual side effects, tunnel vision, distortions from Doppler-shifted light, or the eerie flattening of starfields into a forward cone. Even if your eyes adapt, your brain might feel the cognitive equivalent of seasickness. You're seeing a geometry no human was meant to live inside for long stretches. Joke 2. You imagine selling relativistic motion sickness bags in the gift shop, each one decorated with a little cartoon black hole. You remember reading about the Terrell rotation, a purely optical effect that makes fast-moving objects appear rotated rather than squashed, because light from their far sides has to catch up to you. Combined with length contraction, it means what you see and what you measure can feel like two different universes. You're living in the intersection of those truths, steering through a starfield that's both closer and farther, bigger and smaller than anyone stationary would believe. The hum of the ship is steady, but the pace of your own thoughts feels quickened, not because time has changed for you, it hasn't, not in your frame, but because the landscape ahead keeps changing too quickly for your instincts to catch up. That instinct wants to map distance to effort, but here, effort and distance are no longer polite conversation partners. Joke 3. You imagine trying to explain this to a delivery service. Yes, I got here instantly, but also it took 20,000 years. Please adjust the invoice. You ease back slightly on the throttle, just to feel the space stretch out again. The starfield uncoils, reluctantly, like a fist unclenching. In the stillness, you realize you've been treating space like a river to be crossed, when it's really a fabric that reshapes itself around your choices. That means every step forward at this speed is a subtle redefinition of reality, not just a trip between 2 points. You turn your gaze forward again. The contraction is waiting, ready to take hold the moment you push back to full speed, but you're beginning to suspect that instant arrival, even if it feels real, might not be the prize you thought it was. The universe always has its own accounting system, and you can't know the full cost until you slow down and see what's changed behind you. Ahead, the light sharpens once more. You're not at the end yet, but the road is about to curve towards something stranger. The possibility that moving too fast for too long might make reality start dropping pieces of your own history, as if it can't carry all of you forward. You ease the throttle forward again, and the hum rises, smooth and insistent. Space ahead tightens into that familiar, forward-pointing cone, but something else happens too, something you can't quite name at first. It's a feeling of lightness, not in the physical sense, but in the way memories sit in your mind. Whole scenes from your life feel thinner, less anchored, as though someone has been quietly removing them from your shelves. You test it with something small, the memory of breakfast on your last morning at the station. At first, it's clear the taste of coffee, the sound of a spoon tapping ceramic. But when you try to hold it, details dissolve. The cup is still there, but the spoon is gone. The station's mess hall has no windows. The coffee has no smell. It's like a half-remembered dream, stripped of the parts that proved it was real. Science, fact. In relativity, simultaneity becomes frame-dependent. When you move close to light speed, the slice of space-time you call now tilts relative to others. The farther you go, the less your now overlaps with the now of your starting point. In extreme cases, entire events from your past can slip outside your present light cone. They're no longer part of your accessible history. Odd fact. There's an analogy in black hole physics. Information falling into a black hole is still there in the global picture, but to an outside observer, it becomes unreachable, redshifted into invisibility. Your situation is softer but similar. The faster you go, the more pieces of your personal past slide into regions you can't communicate with or revisit, even in principle. You lean back and let that settle. Maybe this is why you feel lighter. At this speed, the universe is not only contracting distances ahead, it's quietly unhooking the anchors behind. Your timeline is slimming itself, dropping ballast so you can keep accelerating. Joke 1. You picture your brain as a lazy travel companion, tossing memories overboard just to make more room for snacks. You check your log for reassurance. The entries are all there in text, but some are strangely hard to connect with emotionally. You know you wrote them, but you can't feel the moment you did. It's as if the diary belongs to someone you've read about, not someone you were. Scientists still debate whether there's any cognitive equivalent to this effect in real near-light-speed travel, but philosophically, it fits. When your personal definition of now drifts away from where your memories were formed, it's no wonder they feel foreign. Your frame is moving on without them, and the parts of your life you left behind are no longer part of your immediate causal network. Joke 2. You wonder if this is the ultimate decluttering method, Marie Kondo, but for entire decades. The ship's hum feels warmer now, almost sympathetic, as if it knows what you're losing. Outside, the stars ahead burn sharp, but the ones behind you are dimming faster than physics alone can explain. You know they're being redshifted by your motion, but the symbolism is hard to ignore. Even light from your own past is being stretched until it fades from view. You try to call up a larger memory, your first launch into space. The exhilaration is still there in outline, but it's hollowed out, like someone replaced the orchestra with a memory of the sheet music. You're both grateful and unnerved. Grateful because the ache of homesickness is lighter without all the details. Unnerved because you're starting to feel like a thinner version of yourself. Joke 3. You think about returning home like this and telling people, "Yeah, I remember you," probably. You close your eyes and wonder if this is a hidden tax on extreme speed. The universe helps you get where you're going by letting go of where you've been. In a way, it's merciful. Too much past, carried intact, might make the trip unbearable. But in another way, it's theft. Those moments were yours, and now they belong to some version of you that's no longer reachable. When you open your eyes, the console is waiting for your next decision. You could slow down, reclaim some of the overlap between your frame and the one you left, and pull those drifting memories back into reach. Or you could keep pressing forward, let more ballast go, and see how much lighter and stranger you can become. You rest your hand on the throttle and look forward. Ahead, the road isn't just about speed anymore. It's about identity and how much of yourself you're willing to leave behind in exchange for getting there sooner. Your hand stays on the throttle, but you don't push forward yet. The hum of the ship is steady, patient, like it knows you're hesitating for reasons that have nothing to do with fuel. Losing fragments of your past is one thing. Wondering if the direction of time itself could flip under your feet is another. And yet, that's exactly the thought that's been circling you since the first moment your watch ticked backward. You stare at the clock again, not because it's misbehaving now, but because you're imagining the next step. What if you could actually reverse time, not in appearance, not as an optical trick, but in your own personal frame? What if, for you, cause and effect traded places? Science fact. In physics, time reversal isn't usually about rewinding your life. It's a symmetry in the equations. Many fundamental laws look the same if you swap the direction of time, as long as you also reverse certain other quantities, like momentum and spin. In particle physics, this is tied to CPT, symmetry reverse charge, C, parity, P, and time, T, and the math still holds. But in our macroscopic, entropy-driven world, reversing time means reversing every microscopic interaction, which is why we don't see it outside carefully controlled systems. Odd fact, certain rare processes in particle physics actually violate time, reversal symmetry directly. Experiments with neutral kaons and B-mesons have shown tiny preferences for one time direction over the other. They're not sending anyone backward through history, but they do hint that time has a subtle, built-in bias. The thought makes you shiver. Imagine living inside a localized bubble of reversed time, drops of tea leaping from the floor back into the mug, spoken words unforming into silent mouths, your own breath slipping back into your lungs as though the air is trying to reclaim it. To everyone outside, you'd still be moving forward, they'd watch you age in real time, but inside your bubble, your moments would be untangling in reverse order. Joke 1. You picture eating dessert first, then dinner, then breakfast, all in one perfectly backward day. You wonder what it would feel like. Would your mind play forward while your surroundings rewound, making you a tourist in a reverse-running film? Or would your consciousness follow the reversal, forgetting what just happened as it unhappened, like an involuntary editing process trimming away your most recent scenes? The first is fascinating. The second is terrifying. Scientists still debate whether macroscopic time reversal is even theoretically possible without collapsing under chaos. To reverse entropy, you'd need to reverse the motion of every particle in your system, and the tiniest mismatch would cause the forward arrow to reassert itself almost instantly. It's the difference between neatly rewinding a movie file and trying to get a shattered vase to leap back together mid-air while the room is on fire. Joke 2. You imagine a reverse day calendar where every appointment has already been missed in the future. You close your eyes and try to imagine a safe test. Maybe you could record yourself tapping the console 3 times. If your frame reversed, you'd feel your hand lift before you decided to tap, the console sounds coming in the wrong order, your muscle memory scrambling to keep pace with the reversed rhythm. The act of deciding would feel preempted, as if the choice belonged to someone else and you were just delivering it back to them. A deep, quiet discomfort creeps in. The forward flow of time isn't just habit, it's the thread that ties cause to effect, effort to reward, apology to forgiveness. Reverse it, and those links snap. You might undo mistakes, yes, but you might also undo the lessons that came with them. You might watch grief dissolve, but lose the love that made it grief in the first place. Joke 3. You picture explaining to a friend, "I'm sorry, but we have to break up," retroactively. The hum of the ship is unchanging, a metronome keeping time in a universe that hasn't flipped for you yet. You let your hand drop from the throttle and rest against the cool edge of the console. It's a relief to know that in your current reality, seconds still line up politely, but the idea has left a mark. If the arrow of time can be bent for you even slightly, then perhaps it can also be reversed, and that possibility feels like both a gift and a trap. Ahead, the cone of contracted space narrows, and you get the unsettling sense that somewhere in that funnel lies a version of you already walking backward into this moment. You wouldn't know it until you turn to meet yourself, and then, maybe, you'd both vanish into the symmetry you'd just shared. You shake the thought away and glance forward. The next experiment isn't about living your life in reverse, it's about sending meaning itself backward, folding messages into loops so tightly that the answer arrives before you've even asked the question. You promised yourself you wouldn't do it again, and here you are anyway, staring at the transmitter with the guilty curiosity of someone about to shake a vending machine. The thought won't leave you alone. If causality can be teased, maybe language can be braided into it until sentences pull themselves taut from both ends at once. Letters that write themselves. Replies that arrive while your question is still clearing its throat. You take a breath slow, even, and tell the cabin, mostly to hear it aloud. Okay, one careful experiment. The rules you set are almost ceremonial now. Keep the pulse energy low, keep the encoding simple, keep a log you can't edit. You choose the smallest message that still feels like a message. A single word, why, time-stamped and checksummed, so you can't argue with yourself later. The plan. Direct it to a relay buoy you placed on your outbound path one of your prudent days, back when you thought ahead, instead of sideways, and instruct the buoy to bounce the word back to you if and only if it receives it with a time signature 1 minute in its future. If the trick with frames and simultaneity plays the way you think, then in some inertial reference, the buoy's reply should land before your console registers that you've sent anything at all. Science fact, tucked on a mental sticky note, according to special relativity, for two events separated by a space-like interval, as any superluminal exchange would be, different observers can disagree about their order. Some will see A before B, others B before A. Combine that with faster than light, and you can build circuits where a signal is received before it is sent in a given frame. That's the conceptual engine behind the tachyonic antitelephone. No magic, just Lorentz transformations doing their unnerving job. You don't press send, not yet, because you're wondering what happens inside you if the answer arrives first. A normal conversation stretches like a bridge between two shores. Each word lays new planks. But if the reply precedes the question, the bridge is already standing and you're just discovering it. Where does intention live in a world like that? Joke 1. You consider writing, "Hey me, don't do this," but your sense of dramatic irony politely hands that idea a helmet and sends it to the bench. You tap the armrest in a slow waltz 1, 2, 3, and press the key. The outbound burst is clean, tight, barely more than a whisper of radio. You lean back, pretending you're patient. Then your console chirps, and the word "why" materializes in the log with a timestamp that stamps on your stomach. The buoy's reply is registered 50 seconds before your send time. There's a moment, not fear, exactly more like vertigo. The message you will send has already arrived, fully formed. You compare hashes. They match. You compare the checksum. It sings the same note. You didn't just predict your own word. You've become its courier in both directions. Odd fact, set gently on the console. Philosophers sometimes talk about self-fulfilling prophecies, but physics gives you a stranger cousin, self-consistent loops. In the Novikov self-consistency principle, any event that would cause a paradox simply has zero probability. Only histories that don't contradict themselves can occur. It's not a law we've tested in time machines, none exist, but it's the kind of rule that keeps loops from eating their tails. You exhale. "Why?" you repeat, a little hoarse, as if the ship asked and you're supposed to answer. And now a new obligation clicks into place. You must send the message in 10 seconds, exactly as received, or your log will fork into a contradiction. Choice narrows into choreography. Freedom becomes follow-through. Joke 2. You mutter, "Congratulations, you've invented the world's most stressful reminder app." You send. The universe does not explode, which is both a relief and a disappointment. The buoy's buffer acknowledges receipt from its perspective after you sent it, but your log still shows the earlier arrival. The loop closes with a quiet snap you feel in your jawbone more than your ears. What have you actually accomplished? Not clairvoyance, not cheating the lottery. You've bound intention to consistency so tightly that the message's content turned into a fixed point. You didn't choose why because you were free. You were free because you chose why. There's an odd monkish peace in that realization, like discovering the door only opens if you behave as if it's already open. Scientists still debate whether any of this could exist outside thought experiments without wrecking the broader bookkeeping of the cosmos. Maybe quantum mechanics fuzzes the edges, ensuring that any loop is swaddled in probabilities too soft to stab causality. Maybe chronology protection is real, and you were only wobbling along its guardrail because no real information crossed frames, just a carefully arranged echo. Your hands itch for a second act. If a one-word loop is possible, what about a conversation with yourself? You sketch a protocol. You and future you trade a single character per minute for, say, an hour, each minute's character arriving 1 minute early, each side obliged to transmit whatever came in. In 60 minutes, a paragraph of text would have written itself, as if pulled through a keyhole by its own later end. Joke 3. You picture future you sending nothing but punctuation, and decide that, yes, that tracks. You don't run the protocol, not tonight, because you felt the thinness that speed brings, the way memories fall out of your pockets to make you lighter, and you recognize a similar thinning here. If your letters write themselves, what part of you is left to be surprised? To risk? To apologize and mean it because you could have done otherwise? You take the more human route. You open a fresh log and write a paragraph the slow way, your way, each sentence uncertain until it isn't. You tell yourself something simple and embarrassing and true about why you're tempted by loops, about the grief you'd rewind if you could, about the thrill of having the answer before the question, because questions can feel like cliffs. Then you close the file without minting a loop to guarantee it will always have been written. If it matters, you'll choose it again. Forward. Science has not left you empty-handed, though. You mark a real, practical lesson on the board in your head. Loops aren't for predicting your life. They're for testing your integrity. If you can accept an answer before you ask, and still ask honestly, then you're someone who can live with knowledge without turning it into a cage. That's a decent definition of maturity. Whether or not you ever approach CCC, you look up from the console and back into the cone of light ahead. The road narrows. There are still experiments you could run, longer messages, nested loops, instructions complex enough to tempt paradox, but you've learned enough to know the cost. Creating letters that write themselves risks stories that stop growing. It trades the ache of uncertainty for the sleep of inevitability. And tonight you'd rather ache than sleepwalk. You stand float, really, and stretch until your back pops pleasantly. The cabin's amber light is warm on your hands. Somewhere behind you, 30 years have passed in a handful of your hours. Somewhere ahead, centuries could be waiting with their steady, indifferent stars. Between those immensities, you write one more word, the old-fashioned way, to no one in particular. Thanks. Not for the trick, but for the friction. The transmitter goes dark. The buoy, patient as ever, spins on its tiny orbit and says nothing. If it needs a message, it will get one in a minute that already arrived. You luxuriously finite, courteously slow choose to let the next sentence earn its existence. Outside, a pale trail of dust glitters where your ship has disturbed the quiet, each grain catching a photon and releasing it honestly at the speed the universe promised. You match your breathing to that faithfulness and let the hum fold around you like a shawl. Ahead waits a banquet where everyone swears they arrived first, a social geometry problem dressed as a party. For now, close the log, rub your eyes, and feel the small relief of knowing that at least this paragraph did not write itself. You did. You're not sure what you expected from a cosmic banquet, but it wasn't this. No clinking silverware, no murmur of polite conversation, just a long, curving hall that seems to float in blackness, its walls stitched together with shifting constellations. At the center, a table so long you can't see either end, draped in something that looks like silk but glows faintly, as if it's woven from comet tails. You drift closer, and the chairs are already full. That's the first oddity. The second is that every guest, human, alien, unclassifiable, leans back with the same smug expression, the same triumphant glint, as if they've all been waiting for you just to tell you they were here first. Science fact. This is what happens when you start imagining simultaneity not as a straight line but as a tangle. In special relativity, now depends on your frame of reference. Two events that are simultaneous for one observer may happen in different orders for another. At extreme speeds or across vast distances, arriving first becomes a matter of perspective, not objective fact. Odd fact. Astronomers sometimes observe gamma-ray bursts where the sequence of events is so compressed by distance, relativistic jets, and gravitational effects that determining which photon left first is meaningless. For all practical purposes, they arrive together, but their paths tell different stories. You take a seat, though you're not entirely sure whether you've just sat down or always been sitting here. On your left, a woman in an old naval coat raises a glass and says, "I was the first to arrive." On your right, a gelatinous being with eyes on stalks replies, "No, I was." Across the table, someone who might be a version of you from a different frame of time just smirks and sips. Joke 1. You briefly wonder if this is just a very weird speed dating event. The conversation is a study in chaos theory. Everyone's arrival is anchored to their own clock. For the naval coat woman, she boarded the banquet hall 2 centuries before you. For the gelatinous being, it was last Tuesday. For the other you, it hasn't happened yet, and won't until long after you leave. Each claim is true in its own frame, and none of them match. Scientists still debate whether simultaneity should even be taught as a concept outside of relativity's context, because in practice it's not universal. It's local, dependent on relative motion and gravitational fields. In some speculative cosmologies, simultaneity is an emergent property, a rough agreement hammered out by the slow exchange of signals rather than a built-in feature of space-time. You pick up a fork that seems to have been set in front of you for decades. On the plate is nothing, and yet you feel full. You're beginning to understand that this banquet isn't about food, it's about presence. Everyone here exists in a place where their first is unassailable, even if it's incompatible with everyone else's. Joke 2. You wonder if dessert will be served in reverse order, starting with the person who hasn't arrived yet. There's an elegance to it, in a maddening way. If simultaneity is relative, then every guest can be right without anyone being wrong. It's not dishonesty, it's geometry. The banquet isn't a competition at all. It's a living diagram of how space-time allows many mutually exclusive truths to sit at the same table. You sip whatever is in your glass, it tastes like the smell of rain on metal, and lean back. The naval coat woman explains that in her frame, she watched you arrive late. The gelatinous being swears you've been sitting there longer than anyone else. The other you just grins as though to say, this is what you signed up for. How? Joke 3. You imagine the world's worst awards ceremony, and the prize for first arrival goes to everyone. As the banquet continues, you start to notice the real trick. The longer you sit, the more you lose track of when you arrived. Memory slips here in the same way it did in the corridor of near-light travel. Not because it's being erased, but because before and after stop being useful labels. There's only here. Ho! Scientists still debate the philosophical implications of this kind of relativity. If arrival is a matter of perspective, so is order. And if order is flexible, then maybe stories your story are too. That could be liberating, or it could mean you're always half a step from losing the plot. You set your fork down. The plate is empty again, though you're certain it was never full. Around you, the conversation swirls in 100 different timelines, every guest content to claim their private victory. And for the first time, you don't care when you arrived, or whether you were first, or even if you'll leave. The hum of your ship calls faintly from somewhere far away, like music leaking through a wall. You know you'll stand up eventually, and the moment you do, you'll be in motion again, maybe toward the next paradox, maybe toward the next stretch of space that refuses to agree with you about what now means. But for this moment, you let yourself enjoy the impossible etiquette of a banquet where everyone wins the same race differently. And when you finally rise, you do so without looking back, because you suspect that here, the act of leaving might be the same as having never been at all. The banquet fades like a dream you try to hold on to but can't, replaced by the familiar hum of the cabin. You're back in your chair, but something about the air feels thinner, less linear, as if the seconds are being handed to you in fragments rather than a steady stream. You blink, and there's a subtle jolt in your thoughts. Stories you were carrying are suddenly shorter, compressed, almost like they've been collapsed into summaries. You test it by thinking about your last experiment with the relay buoy. Instead of remembering the details, the checksum, the timestamp, you just recall the fact that it worked. The whole sequence has shrunk into a single, dense factoid. You try another, your departure from the station. All that's left is I left. No coffee, no mess hall, no faces at the docking bay. Science fact. At relativistic speeds, events outside your immediate surroundings can happen so quickly relative to your frame that entire chains of causally connected moments collapse into a single perceived event. This isn't just perception, it's a real difference in how space-time parcels out events for different observers. The intervals between cause and effect are frame-dependent, and at extreme velocities, what's spread out in one frame can be squeezed into one point in yours. Odd fact. In cosmology, there's an idea called cosmic microwave background, last scattering. It's the moment, about 380,000 years after the Big Bang, when photons could finally travel freely. For us, it's a smooth snapshot. For any hypothetical traveler moving at incredible speeds through that early plasma, the entire process might appear compressed into something almost instantaneous, a flash rather than a drawn-out transition. The effect here feels less like compression and more like theft. The histories you once carried in paragraphs are now reduced to bullet points. It's efficient. Yes, your mind can hold more facts this way, but it's stripped of the nuance that gave them life. Joke 1. You imagine telling someone, "Yeah, I read the whole novel," when all you did was skim the blurb on the back cover. You scan your ship's logs, and they're still complete, every detail preserved in cold text, but your emotional connection to them is gone. It's as though the universe, eager to keep up with your velocity, has decided to fold your personal narrative into a digest format. Scientists still debate the experiential implications of extreme time compression. In theory, your brain should run normally in your own frame, but if you process signals from the outside world that have been compressed, your sense of continuity could distort. The flow of events might feel jittery, skipping beats like a scratched record. In practical terms, it could feel like you're flipping through someone else's slideshow of your own life. Joke 2. You picture the universe as a bad podcast editor, cutting all the boring parts of your story without asking you first. The hum of the ship is almost hypnotic now, but it's missing the rhythm you've grown used to. It feels subtly asynchronous. You wonder if this is what it means for time to collapse. Not that it's gone, but that its scaffolding has been removed, leaving you suspended in moments with no clear before or after. You look out at the contracted star field. It's gorgeous, dense and luminous, as if the cosmos itself has leaned in to be close to you. But there's a quiet price in the beauty. You're seeing so much at once that it's all blending together. The sharp edges that normally separate one event from another have been worn smooth. Joke 3. You think, so this is what it's like to binge-watch the universe on 10x speed. You close your eyes and try to reconstruct something from before the collapse. You pick the moment of your first engine burn. You want the sound, the feeling of your body pressing into the seat, the tremor in your chest, but all you get is a clean, unfeeling label. Acceleration began. The scene is gone. It's then you realize this is the logical next step from length contraction and time dilation. The faster you go, the less the universe allows you to carry in its original shape. Distances shrink, external time stretches, and eventually your own past is flattened until it can be carried like a card in your pocket. It's not a bug, it's efficiency. Space-time doesn't care about sentimentality. You grip the armrest and exhale slowly. There's a temptation to keep pushing forward anyway, to see how much can be condensed, how much of yourself you can fit into a single unbroken moment. But another part of you wonders if the next stage won't be compression at all, but deletion. Ahead, the light funnel narrows again, sharper than before, almost like an arrowhead pointed at your chest. The next stretch won't just be about squeezing time, it might start reversing it in pieces, fragment by fragment, until you're left wondering which way you're even facing in your own story. The arrowhead of light ahead feels more like a warning than a path. You've been expecting the usual more contraction, more distortion, but what comes next isn't compression at all, it's entanglement. The moments around you stop standing in a neat row and start weaving together like threads pulled into a knot, cause and effect twist until you can't tell which thread came first. It begins subtly. You reach for the cup on the console, and halfway through the motion, you remember having already set it back down. The act and the memory overlap, neither fully leading the other. It's not déjà vu, it's simultaneity turned inward, the strands of your own experience crossing so tightly that the sequence no longer matters. Science fact. In the block universe model of space-time, a consequence of relativity, past, present, and future all exist equally. Time's flow is a property of consciousness, not the universe itself. At high velocities and over large distances, the separation between before and after can dissolve for events outside your immediate location. Push far enough, and the same logic folds back toward your own timeline. Odd fact. In quantum physics, certain entangled particles defy any meaningful ordering of events when measured. Experiments in indefinite causal order show that under some conditions, it's impossible to say whether event A caused event B, or vice versa. Both happen in a superposed relationship. The hum of the ship is steady, but your inner sense of rhythm falters. You try a simple test, tapping the console 3 times in a row. The sound comes back scrambled. Tap 2 echoes first, then tap 1, then tap 3, but your hand swears it moved in the right order. The mismatch is disorienting but not unpleasant, like hearing a familiar song remixed mid-play. Joke 1. You imagine hiring a drummer in this frame and realizing their downbeat is just a suggestion. You notice that the same weaving happens with thoughts. You start thinking about the station you left behind, but midway through, you're already reacting emotionally to what would have been the end of that thought before you've even reached it. It's like the conversation between your mind and your memories has stopped waiting for turns. Scientists still debate the philosophical fallout of such scenarios. If causal order is not absolute, then the concept of responsibility gets fuzzy. In a universe where cause and effect can be reversed or merged, I did this because of that, becomes this and that coexist, braided together. The distinction between choosing and being chosen by events blurs. Joke 2. You think, if I burn dinner in this frame, maybe the smoke alarm will go off first and warn me. You lean forward, elbows on your knees, and watch the stars. They too seem tangled points that should be light years apart, appear to overlap, their photons arriving as if they coordinated in advance. Your sensors confirm they're still separate in space, but the light's arrival times are so warped that their stories have merged into a single shared moment. You realize this is the purest form of what you've been chasing since the first section of this journey. Not speed, not distance, but the breakdown of the strict line between was and will be. The result is not chaos, but tapestry, a structure where sequence is replaced by pattern. Joke 3. You decide that if your autobiography ends up in this frame, the chapters can be read in any order, finally a book that makes sense for insomniacs. The emotional weight of it catches you off guard. Without sequence, regret fades. How can you regret something if it's not behind you but right here, alongside every other moment? But anticipation fades too, because nothing is truly ahead. You live in a simultaneous bloom of everything, but the petals have no order, and the scent is all at once. You sit with that for a while, letting the hum and the tangled starlight fill the cabin. The temptation is to stay here forever. No loss, no waiting, no racing to catch up. But you know the danger. Without sequence, stories dissolve. And without stories, meaning thins until it's just static. Somewhere deep in the instruments, a low tone sounds a reminder that your velocity is still increasing relative to much of the visible universe. The tangle may not hold. Ahead lies the possibility of landing in a frame so disconnected from your origins that the you who left might as well have been someone else entirely. You take a breath, steady, and let the thought settle. Sometimes the universe loosens the knot and hands you back a thread. When that happens, you'll have to choose whether to keep weaving or pull free. For now, you rest in the braid, knowing it can't last, and watch the light shift from tangled to something that looks disturbingly like absence. The absence doesn't arrive with a bang. It's a slow unpeopling, like walking through a childhood home after the furniture's been moved and the walls repainted a color that refuses to remember you. You ease the throttle down, let the cone of light widen, and watch the starfield stretch back into a sane geometry. The ship shivers once, a dog shaking off river water, and then the displays settle. You're coming home. Home is patient. It's been busy while you were gone, but in your frame gone was barely a handful of hours stitched together with a few experiments and a stubborn heartbeat. The docking vector appears where you left it almost. New satellites crowd the sky like beads on invisible strings. The station beacon that used to ping at a steady 1 Hertz now chirps at a rate your instruments flag as legacy. You align anyway. Muscle memory, old friend. Take the wheel. There's a hush as the airlock cycles new seals, different chime, a scent of resin you don't recognize. The inner hatch opens, and you are instantly, perfectly out of place. The corridor's curve is familiar, but the metal has a different grain. Panels labeled in a font that makes your stomach lurch with nostalgia you haven't earned. A figure approaches in a uniform cut you've never seen. They smile the way people smile at exhibits behind glass. "Welcome," they say carefully. "We've been expecting someone like you." You answer with a name that feels right in your mouth, but it lands in the room like a museum tag. Their wrist display blossoms with a genealogical overlay. Your records exist, but in a folder labeled historical. The dates are correct and also not. Birthdays have become anniversaries of a person who is technically alive, and also in the way that matters at parties, not invited. Science fact, offered to yourself like kindness. Your differential aging is exactly what the equations promised. Your proper time measured by a clock moving with you, was shorter than coordinate time on the station because of your high velocity. Add in a dash of gravitational time dilation if your trajectory dipped close to a massive body, and the mismatch grows. This is the twin paradox unparadoxed on a Tuesday afternoon. You took a long path through space-time where your clock ticked fewer ticks. Odd fact, languages drift faster than you think. A couple of human lifetimes can turn slang into archaeology. Dialectologists have measured shifts of vowel sounds a few millimeters in mouth space per generation. Pile on cultural churn, and "I'm home" can become a phrase that lives in the mouth, but not in the neighborhood. You say hello, and hear yourself speaking an accent that belongs in a black and white film. They walk you through the station like a tour guide who can't decide if you prefer history or anthropology. The cafeteria is gone, replaced by a quiet commons full of mossy walls and chairs that loom like friendly beetles. The coffee machine has a plaque. The window where you used to count cargo pods is now a display explaining how people used to count cargo pods. Someone has curated your present into their past. Joke 1. You briefly consider charging admission for anyone who wants to hear what a door used to sound like. What you do next is simple and invasive. You try to find them. Not them as a category, you're them. The laughing woman in the mess at shift change. The engineer who fixed your stubborn air filter with a screwdriver and 3 surprising curses. The kid who asked for your autograph on a napkin and misspelled your name charmingly. You tap the terminal. Names unfold like paper cranes and then fold again into obituaries, retirements, transfers to gravity. You learn that the kid grew up to design antenna arrays, those metal sunflowers you saw on approach. You learn he moved away. You learn he died peacefully last spring. You learn nothing about the laugh, because no database honors the sound of a room loving someone. Scientists still debate whether we're built to tolerate reintegration after relativistic separations, whether a mind can wear 2 tempos without fraying. Some argue we're adaptable, that grief and novelty are muscles with more fibers than we think. Others suspect there's a threshold where identity loses too many reference points, and the person who returns is a ship of Theseus with a familiar call sign. You walk the corridor as the debate echoes in the soles of your feet. They give you a visitor band, which is either thoughtful or devastating. It unlocks doors you used to open by habit and bars others with a politely apologetic red pulse. You sit in a room labeled Listening Library and let a wall of little speakers pour the last 30 years into your lap. Public bulletins, births, arguments about water allocation, a song that was everywhere for one summer and then nowhere. What disorients you isn't the scale of change but its confidence. Time didn't wait for you, it grew into its clothes. Joke 2. You try to order your favorite sandwich, and the station's nutrition AI suggests a smoothie that tastes like piety and wet paper. A curious person, they are always curious, thank everything, asks gently, "What was it like?" You pick a true answer that won't tip the world, quiet. You skip the banshee math of clocks, the edges where letters write themselves, the banquet where everyone arrived first. You don't say, "I am the same age as the jokes we told at the old window." Instead you ask, "Do you still have the maintenance shaft that runs behind the greenhouse?" Their eyebrows jump. They do. It smells the same. Damp earth, damp metal, damp forgetting. You count bolts. You count breaths. You rehearse the oldest trick you know. You let the scene be ordinary until your nervous system stands down. A child wanders in, trailing a caretaker bead string, and stares at you with the frankness of people who haven't learned not to. "You're from before," the child announces. making before sound like a place with weather. You nod. We kept the stars for you, they add, solemn as oath, and point upward as if you might have missed them. Science tries to help here, in the way a map helps when you want a hug. You remind yourself that simultaneity is relative. What looks like forgetting from one frame is simply non-overlap from another. Their now is wide in places yours is thin. You don't correct the child's grammar of time. You say, "Thank you for holding them," because the sentence is more accurate than any correction would be. You make a plan in an earnest, quiet way. Give yourself a week to try. Learn the new doors. Learn the names of the plants that crawled up where your coffee used to be. Learn the soft curses people say at the water recycler when it pings, "Service soon." If you can stitch these to the few threads that still hold, maybe the cloth won't tear. If it does, you have a ship with fuel enough to be honest about your limits. Joke 3. You tell yourself you'll blend in by nodding a lot and using the word interface in sentences where it doesn't belong. Night, the station's version of night, glides in. Window shutters dim. The populous hush of sleeping machinery takes over. The lovely lullaby of fans and pumps and the improbable kindness of oxygen. You walk to a viewport that has not moved in 30 years and set your palm against it. The glass is new. The stars are the same, which is to say entirely different and entirely themselves. Oddly, this is the moment when the forgetting feels mutual and forgivable. The world didn't forget you like a lost key. It filed you under paused and carried on. You didn't abandon it. You took a long shortcut that made the clocks disagree. There's mercy in that framing. Mercy and a kind of permission. Scientists still debate whether there's any principled way to define a universal present. Special relativity says no. General relativity shrugs and adds gravity to the problem. Philosophers splice intense theory and argue about whether now exists or merely persists as a useful fiction. You, lately an expert in useful fictions, accept the practical one. Their now is real to them, and yours is real to you, and the handshake is a slow learning of idioms. You leave a message in the new system, no loops, no cleverness, just text with your odd vowels and your honest hope. If anyone remembers an old laugh at window C, I'll be sitting there for the next few nights, growing new memories slowly. Bring a story. I'll bring the stars you kept for me. You stay until your reflection is a darker smudge in the pane, and the station's dawn routine starts whispering along the ducts. Your ship waits where you left it, patient as a dog that only understands return. You don't decide tonight whether you'll stay or go. You do something smaller and braver. You learn the name of the person on the next shift. You say it twice, so it sticks. You answer when they ask for yours, and when their face brightens with recognition from a school book, a family story, a museum caption, you let the brightness warm the room. The world forgot you the way fields forget footsteps. By growing, you walk out into that green with your boots, still dusty from elsewhere, and you practice leaving a trail that's visible in this season. You don't sleep much that first night. It's not the station's artificial dawn and dusk cycle, nor the thin hum of air scrubbers that sounds like someone humming through a tin can. It's the sense that you've stepped sideways into a play that's been running for years without you, and now you're trying to improvise your lines without knowing the plot. When morning comes, morning by their definition, you decide to walk, not the guided, polite tour from yesterday, but your own wandering route. You pass bulkheads, painted colors you've never seen on this station, and each one feels like the universe tilting slightly under your feet. A maintenance bot rolls past, pauses, and scans you as if you're an interestingly shaped piece of debris. Its display flashes archive personal, obsolete status before trundling away. You feel like a postcard returned to sender after decades at sea. Science fact. Cultural drift is not just about language, it happens with tools, interfaces, even posture. Anthropologists studying long, isolated communities note how gait, gestures, and eye contact norms can shift in just a few decades. In your case, even your body language carries the signature of a slower clock. People here stand differently, turn their heads in quicker arcs, their conversations cutting and weaving like a school of fish. You move like a freighter in a bay of skiffs. Odd fact, In the early 2002, researchers found that astronauts who'd spent months on the ISS developed subtle changes in walking patterns due to microgravity adaptation. On returning to Earth, they walked differently for weeks, steps fractionally longer or shorter than average sometimes without realizing it. Now, you're that phenomenon, but temporal. Your entire rhythm is calibrated to a time that no one else keeps anymore. At the hydroponics bay, you stop to look at rows of plants under violet light. They've replaced the lettuce and tomatoes, you remember, with a dense jungle of curling vines, each one bred to grow in tight spirals that make harvesting easier. A young attendant eyes you cautiously before approaching. You're the pilot, right? The one who came back? You nod. My grandmother used to tell me about your ship, they say. Said she saw you leave when she was my age. Joke 1. You resist the urge to tell them she must have had great eyesight because I barely remember leaving. They offer you a handful of something green and sweet. It tastes faintly of cucumber and memory. You thank them and keep walking, but the weight of what they said follows you. Their grandmother saw you leave. To you, she was barely a figure on the dock. To them, she was a source of legend. You've been mythologized in your absence, and now you're here, smaller than the myth. Scientists still debate how identity functions when your personal timeline is out of sync with your community's. Some suggest that reintegration is a matter of storytelling, learning to bridge the gap with a shared narrative, even if the facts don't line up neatly. Others argue that it's more like translation. You convert your life into their tempo, knowing some nuance will be lost. You try this out later in the listening library, finding a group of off-duty workers clustered around a holoprojector. They're watching something labeled Historic Drift, the early expansion era. To your surprise, one of the clips is you standing on a launch platform, squinting into a wind you can almost feel again. The commentary describes you, in the third person, all titles and formality, like you're a fictional character. You say nothing. You don't want to puncture the narrative they've built. Joke 2. You briefly wonder if you should start charging royalties every time someone watches you in grainy monochrome. The day wears on. You eat with strangers who call you returner, a word that feels ceremonial but faintly distant. They want to know what you saw, what it was like, whether the stories are true. You answer in a way that's both honest and incomplete. You tell them about starlight that bends like glass, about the sensation of moving so fast that space itself flinches. You don't mention the banquet of simultaneous arrivals, or the way your own memories compressed into footnotes. Some things you keep. Later, in a quiet corridor, you find the old viewport that used to be your place for thinking. It's smaller now, replaced by a slimmer, reinforced frame, but the stars beyond are familiar enough to make your chest ache. You lean on the rail and let the hum of the station settle into your bones. You're not sure whether this is still home, but it's a place where your name can be spoken without explanation, and that's something. Joke 3. You imagine leaving again just to see how much weirder it all gets next time, like a long-term social experiment no one asked for. Night cycle comes, and you walk back to your temporary quarters. Outside your door, someone's left a small, folded note. It says simply, "We remember the window and the laugh. Come find us." The handwriting is shaky but deliberate. You feel a ripple, something bridging the gap, threading your clock to theirs, however briefly. You realize, as you hold the note, that reintegration isn't about resuming where you left off. It's about weaving a new thread that respects both fabrics, the one you carried and the one they've been stitching without you. And maybe, just maybe, it's worth staying long enough to see what that looks like. You wake with the note still on the table beside your bunk, its paper creased, like it's already been carried through more than one set of hands. There's a calm to the morning station time morning that feels different from the last few days. The urgency to prove you belong here, to reclaim something lost, has softened into something quieter. You know you'll never be the same as the people around you, and maybe that's the point. The corridors are less alien now, not because they've changed, but because your mind has stopped trying to force them into old shapes. You catch yourself matching your stride to the quicker tempo of others. You even catch your reflection in a panel and notice your shoulders aren't sloping under the weight of dislocation anymore. They've found their balance. Science fact: the process you're in has a name in psychology: acculturation. It's the slow alignment of habits, language, and worldview when entering a new or changed culture. Studies show that the stress of adaptation is highest when someone returns to a place they expect to be familiar but isn't, known as reverse culture shock. Over time, the mind reconciles the difference not by erasing the old, but by integrating it. Odd fact: in 1971, an atomic clock experiment flown on commercial airliners confirmed time dilation with incredible precision. The airborne clocks lagged behind their stationary counterparts by billionths of a second. A difference so tiny it's invisible to our senses, but large enough to change synchronization. Your journey was the same phenomenon, scaled until the gap was wide enough to walk through and meet an entirely new world. You follow the note's invitation after midday. The meeting place is in the oldest section of the station, a lounge tucked behind a bulkhead painted the color of dust. Inside, 3 people sit by a viewport, talking in low, rhythmic voices. When you introduce yourself, the oldest of them, a man with eyes like folded maps, smiles and says, "We used to sit here too, before." Before. The word lands softly, without accusation. They tell you about the days when the station was smaller, when the coffee machine still rattled in the mornings, when the corridor lights flickered in storms. They talk about the laugh, the one you thought was gone. They remembered it because it was the kind of sound that made the whole room inhale before they joined in. For the first time since returning, you feel seen not as a relic, but as a person who has simply been away. Joke 1. You warn them that if you start laughing now, it might cause a timequake. You spend hours swapping pieces of the 2 timelines, your compressed one, their stretched one, like exchanging postcards from different countries. Some moments match up unexpectedly, others don't at all, but it doesn't matter. The act of exchange becomes its own form of timekeeping. Scientists still debate whether time is something we travel through or something we create in the act of measuring. The block universe model says all events exist at once. Presentism says only the now is real. Sitting here, with your past braided to their present, you suspect both are true in ways neither theory quite captures. You leave the lounge as the artificial dusk seeps in, walking slower this time, not because you feel lost, but because you want to notice each step. The air hums around you, the scent of plant life, from hydroponics mixing with the faint tang of metal. Somewhere in the station's core, machinery turns, pulling seconds into minutes, minutes into days. Joke 2. You think about bottling the station air as vintage now and selling it to passing travelers. When you reach your quarters, you pause at the viewport. The stars are steady tonight, unwarped by motion or speed. They shine without urgency, each one a reminder that you've touched something few have and returned with your clock still ticking. You realize the journey wasn't just about pushing beyond the speed of light, though that was the hook. It was about learning what changes when you return. Time didn't betray you. It simply did what it always does. It kept going. And so will you. You decide you'll stay for a while, long enough to build something here that belongs entirely to this now, without erasing where you've been. Long enough to add your own laugh back to the air, so someone, decades from now, will tell a story about the returner who came home and made the station sound lighter again. Joke 3. You hope they'll also tell the part where you beat the station AI at chess twice in a row, even if it was probably humoring you. The hum deepens as the lights dim, a lullaby written in engineering manuals and pressure seals. You breathe with it, slow and even, until your pulse matches the station's for the first time in a long while. You're not thinking about where or when you should be next. You're here. And for now, that's enough. You began by chasing a question. If you could exceed the speed of light, how would time change? The journey bent starlight and warped hours into strange shapes. You watched distances collapse, memories compress into summaries, and cause and effect tangle into knots. You saw simultaneity turn into tapestry, where past and future blurred into a single, ongoing bloom. But speed had its cost. You return to find the station older, its people changed, its culture speaking a tempo your clock didn't know. You learned that reintegration is a science of its own, part psychology, part patience, built on weaving your thread into a cloth already growing without you. Slowly, you found the pieces that still fit. A window, a shared laugh, a note inviting you back into the story. The science says time dilation is simple. Moving fast makes your clock tick slower. The experience says otherwise. The real challenge is what you do when you step back into a world that kept ticking without you. Now, in the quiet hum of the station, you choose not to chase speed, but to live in this present, yours, theirs, both at once. And the stars, steady as ever, keep watch,